I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Tuesday, guys. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. My special guest tonight is Abdul Muhammad. He is an award-winning educator, and he has been teaching in Chicago public schools for over 25 years. Welcome, Abdul. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, sister, and thank your listeners as well.
So, Chicago public schools, and I've heard some stories, and some of the stories I've heard coming from CPS are similar to Boston public schools. So when you sent me this information, I actually wasn't surprised.
Yes, ma'am.
There appears to be a problem with Chicago public schools, in particular, Black male principals. And I want to show this article here. It says Chicago public schools, aggressive tactics for removing principals under the microscope. 9 principals have been removed pending discipline or investigations into serious misconduct in recent years. Of those 6 are Black men. Let's go ahead and get started with that. What happened with you specifically, Abdul?
Like you said, I've been an award-winning educator for the last 25 years in the city of Chicago. I won the Teacher of the Year award. I was nominated for Who's Who Among, well, not nominated, but I was featured in Who's Who Among American High School Teachers for 4 or 5 consecutive years, as well as nominated twice for the Golden Apple Award. Although I've done stellar work in every school that I've ever worked in, transformed every school with everything that's going on in the city of Chicago, I've done that transformative work. When I got to a new school, last school year, the school is 75% Black, but the staff is 95% white. There were 7 white teachers who did not like the fact that a Black man was selected to be the principal of this school in the Black community. Even though the school is in a Black neighborhood, it's a Black school. The local school council is the body that elects the principal, and the local school council members are Black. But the staff was 95% white. And believe it or not, the school has never had a Black principal since it reopened in 2005. So I was the first Black principal at this particular school called Lindblom High School in Chicago. And, when I was elected to be the principal, that is when the problem started, as well as the fact that when I got to the school, I was holding the white teachers accountable for what they were not doing in the school for Black children.
Mm-hmm. So for people who are not aware, Boston Public Schools is similar. If you go to some of the schools in like Roxbury, Mattapan, et cetera, those are predominantly Black neighborhoods. But if you go to the schools and you look at the teachers, the educators, they do not resemble the people in the community. So Absolutely. This is oftentimes like not uncommon, particularly in a lot of these cities like Chicago, Los Angeles, Boston. You'll see this in New York as well. One of the things that I do want to bring up, because I've noticed this seems to be a trend in Chicago public schools, there is a teachers union, correct?
Yes, ma'am. The Chicago Teachers Union.
Are the principals a part of the teachers union?
No, ma'am. It's against the law for the manager to be in the same union as those who they manage. So principals and teachers are in a separate union. And the mistake that people make is they think that the principals have the same protections that teachers have, but principals don't have those same protections. In fact, in Chicago, we don't have a union. We only have an association. We just got bargaining rights in December. I believe it was December of 2022. We just got bargaining rights. So the contract for the union is actually still being written, but we don't have a union as it stands right now.
Yeah, see, that's what I figured. What in particular what were the accusations made towards you?
So as I shared with you in the email, the teachers made over 83 false claims and gave those false claims to the law department. And they did sloppy investigation. The article that you just shared was written by Sarah Karp. Sarah Karp is one of the famous educational journalists in Chicago. She's the one that exposed Barbara Byrd Bennett that led to her being locked up for the contract, the no bid contract that she did under the table, as well as expose the lack of special education services for children in Chicago and many other issues. Sarah Karp wrote that article, and in that article, she laid out 3 points that we had been making all the time. The first point that she laid out was that Chicago Public Schools targets Black educators. In 1 year, they removed 10 principals. 2 were white and 8 were Black. Of those Black principals, 7 were Black men. So Black men only make up 8% of the principals in Chicago Public Schools, but Black men are 70% of the removals. So what Sarah Karp proved, what we had already been saying, is that Chicago Public Schools targets Black leaders, specifically Black men. The second thing that Sarah Karp's article also bore witness to that we had been saying is that the charges that they use to remove principals are petty. So, for example, the teachers lied and said that I took a student to the gas station. There's a gas station right around the corner from the school. Now, y'all have to understand that this is Chicago, right? This is Inglewood, right? In Chicago, which is a high crime area in the city of Chicago. So let's say that I did walk a student to the gas station so the student could be safe. There is no crime in that, you know? So what Sarah Karp was saying is like, these are petty charges. Principals should not be removed from their job over something so petty, right? So that's one, and I could give other examples, but the third thing that Sarah Karp said that we had been saying is that the investigation was sloppy. In my particular investigation, there were 40 witnesses that they didn't even interview. The only people they interviewed were the 7 white teachers that did not want me at the school. And the last thing that we had been saying that Sarah Karp did not say is that the charges, and I know in my case particular, are 100% false. So for example, if you ask me, well, did you walk a student to the gas station? Absolutely not. In the Chicago Public Schools Law Department report, it says in 2 different places that the student left the school to go get snacks. So, I mean, I can't make this stuff up. But they use these fake investigations to remove principals in Chicago that are doing an effective job with Black children, but then at the same time complain about the problems that they have with those same children.
But why does it matter if you did walk a student to the gas station?
Exactly. Right. So that's the point that Sarah Karp was making in the article. Even if the principal walked the student to the gas station to be safe, why is that a problem? But the bigger issue is it never happened. It is a 100%. It's just a lie. And Chicago Public Schools Law Department, the investigator, her name is Kelly Tarrant, and she accepted any lie that these 7 white teachers told. We call her the John Burge of Chicago Public Schools.
Here's the teachers. So these are the 7 teachers: Andrew Heiserman, Christina Davis, right, Gabriella Feimer,
yes,
Ian Brannigan, right, Laren Levites, Joseph O'Hara, and Danya Atta. So these are the teachers.
And I'll just say this real quick because I know we're pressed for time, but Christina Davis was one of the star witnesses for the law department. When I got to the school, Christina Davis, who's the athletic director, when I went to the homecoming football game and there were hundreds of people in the stands, you know, I got back to the school the next day and there was no financial report turned in. Now, I'm the new principal. So like, I'm new to this school. I don't know any of these people. I'm brand new. But they were not keeping financial records at the school. So when I asked for the financial report, right, exactly. And you can put her picture back up there because she's the star witness of the law department. Christina Davis was the athletic director. The school was not keeping financial records from sporting events. When I asked for the financial report from the football game, Christina Davis and the clerk, LaConda McDaniel, they just made up a report because they weren't keeping records and gave it to me. But the amount of money on the report did not match the number of people that were in the stands. So it hit me that there were 4 other games prior to the homecoming game, and they had not turned in financial reports for any of these games. So rather than go back to them, since they lied the first time, I went to the Chicago Public School stadium director and got the actual stadium receipt so I could see for myself how many tickets were sold at the previous games. When I confronted Miss Davis and Miss McDaniel, Miss Davis said, I asked them, I said, where's the money from the previous football games? They both looked at me and said, there is no money. Then I gave each one of them a copy of the stadium report that showed that tickets were sold and money was collected. And I asked them again, I said, where's the money from the previous football game? Miss McDaniel, the clerk, didn't say anything. Miss Davis, who's the star witness for the law department, she said that that's my money. I said, Miss Davis, that's your money. She said, yeah, I brought money to make change. So that's my money. I said, Miss Davis, if you sell one ticket for $5, the $5 belongs to the school. She left my office saying, no, that's my money. Then she emailed me on Saturday, which I have the records for everything that I'm saying. She emailed me on Saturday and said, I realized the mistake that I made. I'll have the money for you on Monday. So I walked into a situation where there was financial mismanagement. And as any good principal would do, I held the people responsible who were responsible for the finances, which was Miss Davis and Miss McDaniel. Chicago Public Schools has not done anything to Miss Davis, even though she mismanaged thousands of dollars, nor have they done anything to Miss McDaniel. They targeted me and for removal. So this is some of this stuff that I walked into when I came to this particular school and started to hold these teachers accountable. And they were upset that they were being held up to the policy. And Miss Davis was not the only teacher at Lindblom that was mismanaging school funds. There was another teacher that had $5,000 of school funds in her personal bank account. And what? I'm not making this up. I have records for everything that I'm telling you. And then there was a third teacher that had $4,000 of fundraising money in his, it was a fundraising account, and he's spending the money as he's doing the fundraiser. And Sister Sabby, when I got there, because keep in mind, I'm new, so I don't know these people. I was under the impression that they just didn't know how to do fundraisers. I did not think that they were actually misappropriate. I just thought that they made a mistake. But when I started to hold these white teachers accountable, then they worked together in a collective manner, Ms. Davis being their star witness, to work with the law department and Kelly Tarrant to have me removed from the school.
This is wild. I've never heard of a school not managing the finances, but at the same time, I mean, there's been some crazy things, and I want to show people the data here that you provided as well. The evidence, it says black male principals, percentage of total principals versus percentage of targeted principals. Percentage of all principals, 8%, and percentage of targeted principals, 70%. It says here, the claim CPS management has a pattern and a practice of discriminating against black male principals and targeting them for removal. The verdict, according to WBEZ and the Chicago Sun-Times, only 8% of CPS principals are black men, but 70% of principals targeted for removal are black men. Is CPS discriminating against black male principals? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And another thing I want to add as well that people who have not worked in this system may not understand. You're an award-winning educator.
Right.
Oftentimes, it is not uncommon when you do go into work, particularly in inner city schools or under-resourced schools. A lot of people go into those schools in particular because they want to make a difference. And I know from experience, right? So myself, like I was a previous educator. I have friends that were educators that did just that because they wanted to make a difference. However, once you get there, what you realize is that they don't really want you to make a difference.
Absolutely.
And I've experienced this. I've had friends that have experienced this as well. That's why a lot of people, if you guys notice in the teaching profession, especially since the pandemic, more people are leaving that profession because they really don't. The school board really doesn't want you to help those students. There was a movie about this. It was called The Freedom Riders. I don't know if everyone's seen that movie. If you haven't, you should see it. It stars Hilary Swank. It's based on a true story of that particular issue where she was a teacher that cared passionately about her job, and she wanted to work in an inner city school in LA, and she wanted to make a difference. And they told her to her face, you will most likely not be rehired next year, because a lot of times teachers don't have contracts. So what they'll do is some of the best educators that come into those schools, and they're able to turn things around for the students, and they're able to increase those test scores. Those are the teachers that oftentimes they will not rehire for the next school year, and they'll keep the ones that are keeping things the same. So in Boston public schools, for example, if you are not a part of the teachers union, you really don't have much of a leg to stand on. But in order to join the teachers union, you have to teach at BPS for at least 3 years, and then you're eligible to join the union. If they don't rehire you for that second school year, that prevents you from joining the teachers union. So what people have to understand is a lot of the teachers, I hear people say there's no good teachers out there. There are good teachers out there, but oftentimes they are teaching at those particular schools, and the school boards, what they come to see, oh, they're helping the students. Those are the ones a lot of times they won't bring back.
Absolutely. This is exactly what's happening in the city of Chicago. Every school, Sister Sabby, that I've walked into, and I need you all, because many of you all look at Chicago from a distance, right? You see what happens on the news. In 10 days, there were 5 students murdered in front of their school within 10 days in Chicago. Not like this has just happened 2 weeks ago. 5 students murdered. Imagine sending your child to school and they come home and they say, you ask, what happened today? Oh, well, there was a double homicide in front of the school. That's what's happening right now in the city of Chicago, and the Chicago Public Schools leadership is working to remove educators from the schools that can transform that. I've worked in the most challenging environments in the city of Chicago, and everywhere I've gone, I've transformed the schools. And the most, I would say one of the best examples is when I was at a school called Nancy B. Jefferson. Nancy B. Jefferson is a school named after a civil rights leader from the west side of Chicago, but it's located inside of the juvenile detention center in the city of Chicago, meaning all the young people that get arrested, get locked up for the things that you hear about, they all have to come to this school, Nancy B. Jefferson. I was the assistant principal at the school, Nancy B. Jefferson. And when I walked in the door my first day, they told me it's 85% Black boys, 14% Latino. And in the time that I was there, I built strong relationships with the young brothers that were incarcerated. So much so that these young brothers wanted to graduate from high school. I'm talking about we're in a school that's inside of a jail. And with the relationships that I built with the young brothers, they were focused on graduating from high school while they were incarcerated. While I was at Nancy B. Jefferson, this was the first time, Sister Sabby, that they could put the various gang members in the same room together. The GDs, the BDs, the Vice Lords, the Four Corner Hustlers, the Latin Kings, the Black Souls, the EBK. Before I got there, they couldn't put them in the same room together. But when I got there, they were able to put these young brothers in the same room together, and there would not be a confrontation. The same transformative work that I've done at every other school in Chicago, I did it at Nancy B. Jefferson. And one day while I was at Nancy B. Jefferson, and I'll end with this, I received the email. And in that email, it said that 1,900 Chicago public school students went to go see this play called Hamilton, which, if you've seen Hamilton, is one of the greatest stage plays in the history of stage plays. And when I read that email, I said to myself, well, my students can't go and see Hamilton because they're incarcerated and I'm incarcerated with them. When I walk in, I have to go through 2 line scans just to get inside the school. When I go to the classrooms, some of the classrooms don't have windows when we're inside of the school. So I'm incarcerated right with them. So I reached out to the producer of Hamilton, and I asked the producer, I said, I'm at Nancy B. Jefferson. My students are incarcerated. Will you bring the Hamilton play to the students of Nancy B. Jefferson? And I worked with that producer for 2 years. And at the end of those 2 years, we brought Hamilton, the play, one of the greatest stage plays in the history of stage plays. We brought it to the students of Nancy B. Jefferson. And while the play was there, the producer pulled me to the side and said this. She said, Mr. Muhammad, Hamilton has only left the stage twice. Once when we brought it to the White House for Michelle and Barack Obama. And the other time is when we brought it to the students of Nancy B. Jefferson. This is the work that I've done for 25 years in the city of Chicago. But like you said, this is the reason why I'm also being attacked, and other educators like me. And it's not just myself. There are other educators who are doing phenomenal work with Black children that are being attacked and removed by Chicago public schools.
I think what people may not understand is that a lot of times with any job that you have, you can do the best job possible. And it's like, if you don't rub the right elbows, or, you know, you're not in the right network, so to speak, then it's like you are either overlooked or you're the first they try to throw under the bus. Like what people have to understand is, like, especially in education, it's not like just doing a great job and being good at what you do. Like that, people just kind of look over it. Like, they just kind of look over it. And like, such as yourself right now, like the fact that you're even in this situation for being accused of taking a student to the gas station. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous when there were people at the school who were stealing money from the school. It does not make any sense. And I think what people have to understand, if you've never attended those schools or you've never worked in those schools, you are dealing with, as an educator, you are dealing with a number of challenges. You are not just coming there to teach them the curriculum. You have to deal with the fact that a lot of these students, a lot of times they're coming from single family home, where their parent is working multiple jobs just to put food on the table and keep a roof over their head. Some of the kids are coming from family homes where there may be drug addiction. I had students show up before where it was obvious that they needed new shoes, like there's holes in the shoes, and you have to deal with all of that. Then you have to deal with, there's the issue of gang violence. So you have to deal with that as well. Like, you're not just showing up just to teach someone a lesson in class. You have to you have to be a counselor. You have to be they want teachers to be everything nowadays. And it's very different when you're teaching in those types of schools versus when you're teaching in the school that's in like a suburban, area that has a lot of resources.
Yeah. There are a lot more challenges in the inner city schools that students face. And as a result, teachers face those same challenges as well. I want to say this real quick because I don't want to forget. There is a website where people can get more information. I put it in the chat. So if your producer wants to put it up there, that website is justiceforabdulmuhammad.com. So it kind of gives some background. It has some of the videos. So Sister Sabby, the teachers, the 3 teachers that were misappropriating thousands of dollars of school funds is really just the tip of the iceberg, So, but when you get into the details of everything that happened, so for example, that particular video, we had 4 staff members at the school. A student went to 4 separate staff members and said that she was being sexually harassed by a security guard at the school. None of those 4 staff members reported. They're mandated reporters. None of the 4 staff members reported the alleged sexual harassment. When I heard about it, after the student went to these 4 people, when I heard about it, of course, I started the investigation. I reported it and started the investigation, and CPS came after me and left those 4 staff members at the school. So those staff members still work at the school, including the security guard who was accused. They left him at the school as well. I can't make this up. This is all true. But this is the level of corruption in Chicago. But the website, justiceforabdulmuhammad.com, there's 3 things we want you to do on that website. One is you can register for the website. 2 was 4 things. 1, register for the website so we can stay in touch with you. 2, sign the petition. 3, there is a link at the bottom where you can email Mayor Brandon Johnson. If you go down to the bottom, Sister Sabby, go up some. Just a little bit more. Yeah. So his name, right. If you click on the letter for Mayor Brandon Johnson, if you click on his name, right, if you come down just a little, right there, if you click on his name, an email will pop out, and it self-populates, and all you have to do is click send. So you can email the mayor. And then last but not least, there's also a GoFundMe on the website. If you would like to donate to the GoFundMe, then it definitely would be appreciated, which is above where you are now. So register for the website, sign the petition, email the mayor. And if you would like to go donate to the GoFundMe, then you can donate to that as well. So, but at Sister Sabby, as we talked before we came on, all of these things, like every time I come on a show, every time I do a radio show, a television show, a podcast, I've had teachers and educators reach out to me from all over the country telling me that the same thing is happening in their city. There is an attack on Black educators. In a city like Chicago, if you go on the Chicago Public Schools website, they will say that we need Black educators, we need Black men, because Black children perform better when they have Black educators in front of them, and Black males perform better when they have Black men in front of them. They will say that out of their mouth, but their actions are the exact opposite of what they say. When I first became a teacher in Chicago, and I've been teaching for 25 years, and teaching is my absolute passion. I love what I do. When I first became a teacher, the percentage of Black teachers in Chicago was 50%. Today, it's only 19%. And the reason is because there was a concerted effort from Chicago Public Schools to remove Black teachers from the classroom. Now, I don't want y'all to take my word for it. They sued, like maybe 2 years ago, Chicago Public Schools was sued. The teachers did a class action lawsuit and won. And it's also featured on the Chicago Public Schools website under the equity section. So they're admitting that they had racist practice and policies that systematically removed Black teachers. They admit on their website that when Rahm Emanuel was mayor, that it was racist to close 53 schools in the Black community. And in that process, it'll affect 30,000 Black children who they said they would not let fall through the crack, but they fell through the crack. And Black people then raised their voice against the school closing and were ignored by politicians, ignored by preachers, definitely ignored by the mayor, right? When they were removing Black teachers, they were ignored by politicians, ignored by preachers, ignored by the mayor. And now, after they've removed Black educators, teachers, and closed Black schools and ill-affected thousands of Black children, now they've turned their attack on Black principals and are systematically removing Black principals from schools using bogus investigations.
Well, the other thing too, you mentioned Rahm Emanuel. Everyone remember he went to work for the Obama administration.
Right.
Like this guy was basically promoted after he closed all these schools in Chicago. Like this type of thing should not happen. And this is one of the reasons why I get so like frustrated.
Not only did he close 53 schools, Sister Sabby, and affect the lives of thousands of Black children and families, but he also covered up the murder of a Chicago public school student when Laquan McDonald was shot down in the middle of the street by the Chicago Police Department, Jason Van Dyke. So he didn't just close Black schools. He did that, right? He didn't ill affect Black educators and Black families, but he also covered up the murder of a Chicago public school student. And when he left Chicago, he is now the ambassador for Japan in the Biden administration.
There you go.
When Black people make one little mistake, you're never getting hired again because you made one little mistake. This man covered up the murder of a child and is the ambassador of Japan. Rahm Emanuel has the complexion for the protection. So what we would love everybody to do is go on the website, justiceforabdulmuhammad.com, sign the petition, email the mayor, and if you would like to donate to the GoFundMe, you can. Sister Sabby, when Chicago Public Schools came against me with this bogus investigation, what usually happens is, people get their, let me say this. What usually happens is people never find out what they've done. The system in Chicago, as it relates to principals, there's no due process. So when they removed me from my school, they told me they removed me on March 31st of 2023. And I asked them, I said, well, when are you going to let me know what I did? They didn't let me know when they removed me. They said, and of course I have the email. They said, we'll let you know in 2 to 3 weeks. They were never going to let me know. The Chicago Principals Association threatened to sue them for defamation if they did not let me know what I did. So when they released the report, what usually happens is principals just walk away. Oh, well, you can't fight CPS. They just walk away. When they released my report, I went through it line by line over 50 times, and I pulled out every lie, which at this point is up to 83 lies. And when I say lies or false claims, I'm not saying, well, I have a difference of opinion. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I have the actual facts to prove that they're lying. I'll give you an example. One of the white teachers named Ian Brannigan said that on December 22nd of 2022, that Mr. Muhammad came to school late and he didn't do anything to help. December 22nd was the first snowstorm of that year. So a lot of people called off. So anybody who's investigating whether a staff member came to work late, I mean, if you were investigating that, Sister Sabby, what would you look at to either prove this is true or false? What would you look at if you had to investigate that?
I mean, if you have to punch in.
It's real simple, right? So in the investigative report, Ian Brannigan makes the false claim that on December 22nd, I came to work late and didn't do anything to help the school. Now, an investigator would have just looked at the time clock. Kelly Tarrant did not look at the time clock. So I went and pulled my time clock from December 22nd and I swiped in at 7:46. Mr. Brannigan swiped in at 7:47. So it's a whole report full of lies just like that. I mean, they can easily be disproven, but the Chicago Public Schools Law Department and Kelly Tarrant, who we call the John Burge of Chicago Public Schools, she didn't even bother to do an investigation. And when Sarah Karp, who wrote the article that was on the cover of the Sun-Times, when she gave my investigative report to Joe Ferguson, who used to be the OIG for CPS, he said the same thing. He said that this is a sloppy investigation. So, but this is what they do. They're used to principals just walking away and not fighting. But I chose to fight. And when I chose to fight, other principals joined the fight. And we want you all to join the fight as well on justiceforabdulmuhammad.com, because this is happening to Black educators all over the country. We cannot lay down. We cannot say, oh, we can't fight the city or whoever. We can't say that. These are our children. These are our children. The greatest fight that we can be involved in is not the fight that happened in Montgomery, Alabama, when the man didn't want to move his ship, his boat, and they got into a fight on the dock. That's not the greatest fight that Black people can be involved in. The greatest fight is not to go fight on a foreign battlefield. The greatest fight is not to fight against Trump or to fight against Biden or for whoever you like or don't like. The greatest fight that we can be involved in is the fight for the minds of Black children. The reason that we continue every generation to suffer the same thing is because we do not have access to the minds of our children to pass down to them the knowledge that they need. And those that do have access are systematically removing Black educators from the classroom. This is the fight. If you put a folding chair in your profile when that fight happened in Alabama, and you honored the inventor of the folding chair on your Facebook page because you thought that fight was a noble fight, this fight is a greater fight, because this fight that we're involved in is the fight for the minds of Black children.
Where is Mayor Brandon Johnson on this?
That's a great question. So in December of 2022, and I'm just give it to you real quick, I had a conversation with the mayor, a one-on-one Zoom conversation like we're talking right now. And he wasn't the mayor yet. He was running for office. And at that time, candidate Brandon Johnson said, he asked me, he said, do you have any political support? I said, yes. I said, the alderwoman supports me as well as the state rep. He said, that's great. That was December of 2022. March, I was removed. In May 18th, we had a press conference at Father Flager's church in Chicago. And we got a call that night. When I say we, myself and the brother who's over the Principals Association, Brother Troy LaRaviere, we got a call that night saying that the mayor, he's now the mayor, wanted to speak to us the next day, which was May 19th. So we had another Zoom call with the mayor. We kind of gave him an abbreviated version of what was going on. The mayor said then, he said, look, my people will get back with you. That was May of 2023. And the mayor's people have not gotten back with us. So the issue that we run into as you already know, Sister Sabby, is unfortunately when we get politicians, black politicians, they cannot work for whatever reason on behalf of the black community. So they're in office and they'll do the bidding of other people. They will even do the bidding of people who are not citizens, who have no legal right to this country, but will not do the bidding of people who fought, bled, and died in every war, fought for every right and everybody. I've been an educator for 25 years. My brother, who was also removed, Principal Gerald Morrow from Dunbar High School, has been an educator for 33 years. Another sister who was removed from the North Side, Harriet Tubman Elementary School, has been in CPS. She went to CPS and she taught in CPS and was an administrator. And that has been for 40 years. And we have been trying to connect with the mayor, but we haven't gotten any response from the mayor or his people. So I'll leave it at that. But the sad reality is we elect black politicians to office, but we don't benefit from the very people that we put in office, unfortunately.
Well said, Abdul. Maybe I should reach out to Mayor Brandon Johnson and see if I can get him to come on this show, because I have a number of questions for him. Right. Maybe I should reach out to the mayor. We'll see. We'll see. Well, Abdul Muhammad, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for educating a lot of people about what's happening in the public school system in Chicago, and particularly your case. And guys, I put the link in the chat for everyone so you can support his cause here, Justice for Muhammad. And I'll put it in the chat again. But Abdul, thank you so much for coming on, and I'll be sure to share this with others as well.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Have a beautiful evening.
Thanks, you too.
All right, bye-bye.
It is a hot mess, ladies and gentlemen. I tell you, with the public school system, I told you, I'll try to tell you guys how it was. It's a hot mess. But I think I'm going to try to reach out to Mayor Brandon Johnson in Chicago, because I got some other questions to ask him too. Thank you for the super chat, Eric Gray. As a black male teacher in Florida, trust and believe that plenty of staff in general engage in behavior that reinforce racist hierarchical power structures. That's right. And thank you for this as well. As Black teachers, we are a threat to the American empire, especially those like myself who are teaching in the same communities that we grew up in. Well said. Thank you so much for that. All right, guys, we have other stories as well to discuss tonight. Really quick, though, I do want to give a shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. I've been telling you guys about these public schools. I told you about these schools. I'm telling you about these schools. All right. Shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you so much for your support. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters. There's also Sabbies in the house. And of course, members. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. And I want to give a special shout out to new Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up to Leland Osby, K. Pez. I like that name, K. Pez, and Sana. Thank you. Thank you so much and welcome. All right, ladies and gentlemen, what else are we discussing tonight? Let's get into it. We're going to share that beautiful thumbnail and roll that beautiful bean footage. Tonight, we are discussing Tucker Carlson speaks out. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Tucker Carlson has finally broke his silence since he's had that interview with Vladimir Putin. I think you're going to want to hear what he had to say. We're also going to discuss Professor Richard Wolff and Michael Hudson. Oh, economic apartheid in the United States. That is a very important discussion. We're going to dive into that. We're also going to discuss the Super Bowl massacre. And you'll see there's a picture of Joe Biden there with those red eyes, that dark Brandon photo. And of course, Netanyahu behind him. And I am also going to make a connection here between the genocide in Gaza and the genocide that happened in Rwanda. You're going to see some similarities, especially in reference to the State Department. And of course, Abdul Muhammad was just here to discuss the Chicago issue. I gotta tell you, listen, Chicago is going through some things. Okay. Chicago is going through some things. Every time I turn around, they're in the news. They're in the news. Thank you for the super chat, Nexus Games. Regarding the examples he shared, I would raise hell if someone took my underage child off campus without my permission. Thank you for that, Nexus. That's a good point. Thank you for that. But to be fair, he says that he actually did not do that. So, okay, let's get started with this story about the Super Bowl massacre. So while a lot of us were watching the Super Bowl and media was focusing on whether or not Taylor Swift was chugging beer or not, something else was happening. While I was watching the Super Bowl, I received a text message from a friend of mine that said, Israel is attacking Rafah right now. Check Twitter. And I checked Twitter. I still call it Twitter. Sorry. I checked Twitter and I saw images that I cannot show on this show of children, video footage of children missing body parts, images that I can't unsee. And we've seen these images since Israel has been attacking Gaza. But what I saw the night of the Super Bowl was even more worse than any of the other images that I'd seen before. Because you see, a lot of us were distracted. And while those of us and those of you that typically watch the show, we saw what was going on in Rafah, the reality is a lot of Americans were totally zoned in on the Super Bowl, an event that millions of people watch. And that's why I have that poll question in the chat. Do you feel that Israel choosing to attack Rafah during the Super Bowl was intentional? Your options are yes, no, or I don't know. But we're going to get into this, and we're going to start off with this clip here from Eddie from Midwestern Marks. This TikTok clip. Listen to what Eddie says here.
So on Super Bowl Sunday, while Americans are all distracted watching a football game, Israel has bombed the village of Rafah. And Rafah is one of the most crowded places in Gaza right now, as it's become a last place of refuge for people fleeing the bombing campaign that's now lasted about 120 days. It's almost impossible to deny that Israel's purposefully targeting civilians here. And one thing I've learned from studying Israel's attacks on Gaza in the past is that they often time these attacks when other world events are going on, so people are distracted. One of their most heinous attacks on Gaza in recent memory happened the same day that a Malaysian acted watching a football game. Israel has bombed the village of
Oh, sorry, guys.
The bombing campaign that's now lasted about 120 days. It's almost impossible to deny that Israel's purposefully targeting civilians here. And one thing I've learned from studying Israel's attacks on Gaza in the past is that they often time these attacks when other world events are going on, so people are distracted. One of their most heinous attacks on Gaza in recent memory happened the same day that a Malaysian airliner jet was shot down over Ukraine. So that was covered in the news, and the attack on Gaza essentially went unnoticed. So as I pointed out in this tweet, I have no doubt that the Zionists timed this attack on Rafah to coincide with the Super Bowl when Americans are...
Pause here for a second. Did you see what he just showed you? They've done this before. Remember when that plane disappeared, the Malaysian plane? Apparently they attacked Gaza then. When you're distracted, when you're focused on something else that is grabbing a lot of people's attention, then they sneak in and do what they want to do.
Distracted. Meanwhile, the Israeli lobby spent $7 million to get an advertisement played during the Super Bowl that was sympathetic towards Israel. Americans are being spoon-fed pro-Israeli propaganda with our football, while Israel is turning Rafah into an inferno. It truly doesn't get more unspeakably horrific than this.
It doesn't. It really doesn't. And for me, it was just very how can you even have an ad during the Super Bowl saying that these dads are hostages and all this kind of stuff, as if the Palestinian people haven't been hostages imprisoned by the Israeli government prior to October 7th. It was very cringe, but that is a part of the Zionist propaganda that I've been telling you about. There was also something else that was very cringe, because for whatever crazy reason, Joe Biden, whoever is managing this Twitter account, whether it's him or if it's PR team, whoever manages this, horrible timing, because they tweeted this tweet, which actually really stirred up some things. Just like we drew it up. And then you'll see, here's the picture here. This is the dark Brandon picture of Joe Biden. They tweeted this during the Super Bowl at the time that Rafah was being attacked. You could not have worse timing. You really couldn't. I don't know who thought this was a good idea. This was a horrible idea. Now, some people looked at this and they said, oh, they're saying that about the Super Bowl. Could have been taken two different ways. Either way, it wasn't good. And it was bad timing. So this caused a stir. So much to the point that I commented on this picture. I did not expect this tweet to get over 1 million views, but I replied to that tweet and I said, it is sick to post this after Israel is slaughtering children. Over 25,000 likes. So I wasn't alone. Don't know who is managing that account. But to show you some of the things that have been happening, Israel has made claims that they were able to rescue 2 hostages during that attack on Rafah. I've seen no evidence of that as of yet. We also have to remember that Hamas offered a ceasefire to return the hostages before the attack on Rafah. Netanyahu rejected it. He rejected that negotiation because, once again, it was never about the hostages. It was about Israel destroying the Palestinian people and claiming the land. He wanted to go in to attack the people. If it was really about the hostages, why did you reject the ceasefire offer from Hamas to get the hostages back? They're claiming they got 2, right? There's also this claim that they're saying that they warned Palestinians in Rafah to evacuate. Let me show you what they did, okay? So Israeli forces have sent a kidnapped civilian to Nasser Hospital to deliver an order of evacuation despite the ongoing shelling and targeting. So let me show you what they did, and then I'm going to explain to you why this is problematic. So you can see total chaos. It says the occupation army sends a detainee who sends a message from the occupation that the hospital must be evacuated immediately. Okay, here's the problem. Every time people tried to leave, the IDF would shoot them. The IDF is shooting anything that moves. They're even shooting animals. There was another video, which I cannot show you, but there was another video on Twitter that showed a child that was shot by the IDF. The child was still alive. They were injured. Adults were trying to come rescue the child. Every time someone moved closer to the child, the IDF would shoot them. They are killing these people. They are slaughtering these people. And the whole world is seeing this. There's no way you can defend Israel right now unless you are a cruel, cold-hearted son of a bitch. There's no way. And after the attack on Rafah, protesters hit the streets again. PSL shared this. There were protests right outside of the White House. Again, Joe Biden, this is right on his front doorstep.
Hands off Rafah now! Hands off Rafah now! We don't want no two-state! We don't want no two-state! Give us back 40 48. Give us back 48.
So notice they said in this protest video, we don't want a two-state. If you have not seen the interview that I did this afternoon with Craig Mockiber is the UN official that resigned. He's the one that wrote that letter that went viral, which explained the reason he was resigning was because the UN was not stepping up in reference to the Palestinian people. And they knew what was happening to the Palestinian people, that they were letting Israel get by with no accountability. In that interview this afternoon, he explains to you why a two-state solution cannot work, and that is actually a lie. Anyone who is telling you right now that they need a two-state solution, he said that is actually a part of the propaganda, you guys. They know there's no way they can have a two-state solution now. And it's funny because I tried to explain this to people 2 years ago. How can you have a two-state solution when Israel has thousands of settlements in the West Bank? How can you have it? It's a lie, you guys. It's a lie. Now, Joe Biden chose to respond about the attacks in Rafah. The king of Jordan actually visited Joe Biden as well. And there is a slip up in this video that I want you to see. Let's just call it a Freudian slip. Let's call it that. Listen to this.
The king and I also discussed the situation in Rafah. As I said yesterday, our military operation in Rafah, the major military operation in Rafah. The king and I also discussed the situation in Rafah. As I said yesterday, our military operation in Rafah.
Our military operation in Rafah? I thought it was Israel's military operation in Rafah. Freudian slip? Maybe? A lot of people are commenting about that video. And a lot of people are pointing out Israel's lies. Because if it's one thing that we've seen are countless lies coming from the state of Israel. And in particular, when we talk about what's happening to people in Rafah, I want you to show one lie that was captured by Cheyenne. Cheyenne, thank you so much for screenshotting this because the Israel account deleted this. The official State of Israel account has posted this video saying it is facilitating aid into Gaza. Okay, so you see this clip, the screenshot? This is from the account, Israel, State of Israel account. It says 11,000 trucks, 140,000 tons of food, 1,000 water trucks, 17,000 tons of medical supplies, 23,000 tons of tents and shelter equipment. Israel will continue to facilitate the transfer of life-saving humanitarian aid to Gaza. Our war is with Hamas, not the people of Gaza. Okay, so there's just one problem. That's not Gaza. And so, you know, there was a correction here. Refugee camp with mini shelter and living place, refugees from Ukraine, stock photo. That was a stock photo that Israel used. And in the description, it says land arranged on the territory of Moldova with tents near the border of Ukraine for refugees coming from war in Ukraine. You see the lies? That was not Gaza. That was Moldova. Now, I want to show you something else, because if we go back, Cheyenne also responded and says, update, the official State of Israel account has now deleted the post. And they did. I could not find it anymore in that account. You see how they just lie? All of this is in our face. And if it's in our face, you know it's in the face of the State Department, the President of the United States, Congress. The same way we're seeing these images, they're seeing these images. Same way we see these tweets, they see these tweets. And it's interesting that Israel would choose to lie about that, considering the fact there are a number of videos showing them blocking aid. There is another one. This came from Elhab. A substantial crowd of extremist Israelis are heading to the Nitzana border, crossing with Egypt to prevent aid trucks from entering Gaza. I don't know the extent of evil and sickness in a person who tries to starve another human being and finds joy in watching them die. And here's a whole carload of them. Look. You see all these cars? How cold do you have to be to stop and to block people from getting food and medical supplies? How cold of a person do you have to be? All of those cars. I told you. You won't see the Israel accounts on Twitter share that, though. They'll share photos from Ukrainian refugees, right? Now, some of you are asking, where are our politicians? Where are the ones willing to stand up? Well, it was interesting. Someone sent me this video here of Senator Chris Van Hollen, of all people, calling out the Biden administration for not being harsher and not holding Israel accountable. It's laughable considering this came from Chris Van Hollen. I'll play what he said, and then I'm going to tell you what actually happened.
Madam President, I want that to sink in. Kids in Gaza are now dying from the deliberate withholding of food. In addition to the horror of that news, one other thing is true. That is a war crime. It is a textbook war crime. And that makes those who orchestrate it war criminals. So now the question is, what will the United States do? What will we do? What will President Biden do? President Biden must take action in response to what is happening. First and foremost, Madam President,
so Chris made that speech, but after that speech, Chris voted for the bill to fund Israel. This is why I continue to say you cannot take these politicians at their word. You have to look at how they vote. Look at how they vote on legislation. And for the love of God, those of you who live in Maryland, and I have family in Maryland, but they ain't vote for these people. Those of you who live in Maryland, stop voting for Senator Van Hollen. Stop electing this guy. Stop it. Just stop. Voted for it. A lot of these people are actors. But there are people willing to fight and continue to fight because South Africa is filing another measure against Israel since the Rafah attack. It says, news on February 12th, 2024. South Africa submitted an urgent request for additional measures under Article 75(1) of the Rules of Court in connection with the developing circumstances in Rafah. In the case South Africa versus Israel before the ICJ. And it says here, I'm not going to read the entire thing, but it says application of the Convention of the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in the Gaza Strip, South Africa versus Israel. Urgent requests for additional measures under Article 75(1) of the Rules of Court of the International Court of Justice. Again, this is very important here. It says here, there has since been a significant development in the situation in Gaza regarding the court's attention. On February 2024, the Office of the Prime Minister of the State of Israel issued the following announcement. It is impossible to achieve the goal of war of eliminating Hamas by leaving 4 Hamas battalions in Rafah. On the contrary, it is clear that intense activity in Rafah requires that civilians evacuate the areas of combat. Therefore, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered the IDF and the security establishment to submit to the cabinet a combined plan for evacuating the population and destroying the battalions. So they have filed this. It says Rafah, normally home to 280,000 Palestinians, currently houses primarily in makeshift tents more than half of Gaza's population, estimated at approximately 1.4 million people, approximately half of them children. So kudos to South Africa, Nicaragua, and Indonesia, because none of the countries in the West want to stand up and step to Israel. Had it not been for South Africa, do you guys realize how brave it must have been? It had not been for South Africa, and they're threatening them, by the way. Israel is now putting threats against South Africa. Had it not been for South Africa, this wouldn't even be at the ICJ to begin with. But there is much more to be done. So that question then falls on the State Department. There's a couple of clips I want to show you from the State Department. These are recent. And then I'm going to make the connection here between this genocide in Gaza and the genocide in Rwanda. Oh, didn't forget about that one. We're going to go to these two clips here. This is from Said Erekat. He said, my exchange today with the State Department. So let me pause this because these are two videos. Let me come to this one.
To Matt's point, the President of the United States of America went out and told the entire world, Israel's conduct is over the top. Israel's conduct is over the top. So if it's over the top, what are you willing to do to make it go under the top?
We are going to engage with them on specific areas where we expect to see improvement.
What kind of improvement? I mean, we saw yesterday that they killed 120 people, maybe a lot more. We don't know how many injured and so on, or how many among the injured will end up dying and all these things. And you're saying that this is, just what you said. You said that we've seen them bomb Rafah, all throughout. Does that make it okay? Does that make it okay when everybody, including the Secretary of State, including the President of the United States of America, including many leaders in this country, have said, you should not attack Rafah, period, or you can attack it by air? Is that it?
We have always said that they can attack legitimate military targets, and we want to see them take every step that they can to minimize civilian casualties. As I just said, we have seen civilian casualties come down, right. But as you and I have discussed many times in this room, Saeed, they face a very difficult situation in that Hamas continues to hide itself among the civilian population.
Let's interject here for a second. You notice what he's doing, right? He said they can still attack military targets. Rafah is a safe zone. If Rafah was a military target, it would not have been labeled as a safe zone. So once again, they hide among the population and yada, yada. If they've been hiding among the population all this time, how come they haven't killed people from Hamas? How come? How come you don't see Israel saying, we took out Hamas? How come? All of these people that they have killed in Gaza, and you have yet to see any confirmation of them killing Hamas.
If this was a war being fought on a battlefield where Hamas would come out and fight, it would be a much different scenario. Right. Unfortunately, it is not. So Israel faces a very difficult situation. Right. Doesn't lessen their need to do more. Right. And that's why we continue to engage with them on this question.
But the fact
we'll make the comparison of when the United States government was going after Osama bin Laden. He was also hiding, right? Wasn't Osama bin Laden hiding? Weren't they trying to find him? Did the United States government just say, we're just going to bomb everybody here and hope that we capture him and his men? They went into the tunnels underground and captured or actually killed Osama bin Laden. You see, So these puppets from the State Department, these people are controlled too. How can you sit there and make that statement knowing that Hamas offered a ceasefire in exchange for the hostages a couple of days ago and Netanyahu rejected it? So to sit here and to say, if Hamas would just come out onto the battlefield and fight, that's being disingenuous.
Is that you do have a magic wand. You have a huge, big magic wand,
I'm
wand.
I'm glad you think it's a magic wand.
It is a magic wand. It is a magic wand, but it's real. It's substantive.
But it is a wand.
It's a wand. I mean, we're talking about billions of dollars that are approved to make this war keep on going. While in fact, we have seen reports from the United Nations that telling you are a shake away, man, from starvation in Gaza. Nothing is going into Rafah. No aid. None of this is going on. I mean, there are so many things that are going on at the same time that the United States can, in fact, use its magic.
And he's right. And then there's a second part to this video here.
So, Saeed, we have used a number of levers at our disposal, and that is why humanitarian assistance is going into Rafah. In fact, your contention is not true.
I'm sorry, guys. Have you seen the number of videos that I've shown you during this show that show you they're blocking the aid? And he's going to tell the journalist that what he's saying is not true. I'm seeing people starving in Gaza. They're on video. There was a guy saying he's been eating grass. These people are not eating food. These people are not getting medical aid. Just because you sent aid doesn't mean it made it to the destination. And the same way I've seen those videos that shows them blocking the aid from coming in, there are also videos of the IDF burning the food and the aid and stopping the people from getting it. This is very dangerous, ladies and gentlemen. Let me make this very clear to you. Do you understand what Israel is doing to Gaza, they can do to anyone else? Why did they feel that Hitler had to be stopped? Because obviously he was killing Jewish people, working them to death, and it started to spread. What Israel is doing to Gaza, they can do to people in Jordan, Syria, Lebanon. This can happen anywhere. It's not just about the Palestinian people. So here's the State Department puppet sitting here lying. There were nearly 200 trucks that went into Gaza. The people didn't get the food. The people didn't get the food. It's like if you got a package coming from Amazon and your package never showed up. So you contact Amazon and say, never received the package. And Amazon contacts you back and say, oh, well, it went out to that address. Does that mean you received it?
Nearly 200 trucks that are going into Gaza. There are nearly 200 trucks of humanitarian assistance that went into Gaza yesterday. If we want to go back to the beginning, it is because of the intervention of the United States that humanitarian assistance is going in. We continue to call for more. When the secretary was there last week, he raised directly with the prime minister that we want to see Erez crossing open so that we can continue to do more. And it is that repeated, sustained engagement that we have shown over time has delivered results, and it's why we'll continue to stay engaged.
Do you expect that Director Burns is meeting tomorrow or scheduled meeting tomorrow in Cairo will produce anything? What is the feeling in this building on the ongoing discussions?
So first of all, I'm going to look around and remind everyone that I'm the spokesperson for the State
Yes,
Department, not any other
understand,
agency. So I'm not going to speak to the travel of.
Well, you're the highest government spokesman.
Members of other agencies in the government. I will say generally as it relates to engagement over the release of hostages. You heard the secretary speak to this and say that we think progress can be made. There were a number of really untenable items in the proposal that came back from Hamas, but we do believe that a deal is possible, and we're going to continue to pursue it from this building as well as from others, because we think the benefits of a pause and a deal for hostages are tremendous. Not just obviously for the hostages who would be released, but also for the humanitarian effort in Gaza and for our ability to begin to pursue a real and lasting, sustainable resolution of this conflict.
If I'm sending you food that, by the way, you're not receiving because it's being blocked by opposition, if I'm sending you food and I'm still giving aid to Israel to bomb you, how am I solving the problem? How am I actually helping? So there's another clip here about the aid. And I want you to hear this comment also from the State Department about the aid.
So you're still ruling out cutting of any aid?
I am not ruling anything out. I'm saying we have not made the assessment that is a decision, or that is a step that would be more impactful than the steps that we have already taken. And at the same time, you have to look at the fact that such a step, how such a step would be received by Israel's opponents, both inside Gaza and outside of the state of Israel.
So what they're asking him is are they still willing to provide aid, economic aid to Israel? So you notice how he did like a word salad response to that, right? That's on purpose.
What levers have you used?
So we have used diplomatic levers. The secretary
That
has.
means that means the secretary and the president and you and Kirby and whoever else standing up and saying, wagging your finger and saying that that's not really leverage.
We have engaged with them on at a multitude of levels at this administration, and as you look at the list that we just went through with Humera, we have seen them take steps at our urging that have had real tangible impact, but they have not been enough.
But what levers have you actually used?
I think that when the United States of America stands up and says something publicly, it matters.
No, it doesn't. Because here's the thing. What he was asking him is, what levers have you used? They haven't used any levers. The easiest lever to use, would be, we are not going to send you any economic aid if you continue killing civilians in Gaza. That's the easiest and the most powerful lever to use. But the United States government is still sending aid to Israel. Like I told you guys, they voted for this already. So you're not using any levers. All the US government has done is they have met with Netanyahu. They've made public statements that we told Israel that they have to try to preserve as many civilians as possible. That's it. That's it. I can tell you, hey, don't hurt those people over there. You can nod at me and say, okay. But if I'm giving you the aid and the weapons for you to continue hurting those people, you're going to do whatever you want, especially if you know that you are not going to be held accountable. And that's part of the problem. Israel has not been held accountable. This is why they take such offense that South Africa brought them to the ICJ, because they are used to getting away literally with murder and what they've done to these people. This is terrible. And for people to say, well, that's over there, don't worry about it. Do you know they can do this to anyone? They can do this to anyone, any group. That's why this is so incredibly dangerous. How far is Israel going to go?
But you haven't. But you haven't said that there would be any consequences.
To my point, we have seen
in terms of money or military assistance, right?
But we have seen, because of the policies we have pursued, we have seen improvements along these specific areas. We have seen tangible improvements. Again,
okay, but I'm just asking you what leverage have you used?
But also,
what leverage have you brought to bear?
I just went through it.
What have you gone?
I think the words of the President of the United States, the words of the Secretary of State matter. And we have seen,
the top,
and we have seen
leverage?
And we have seen the government of Israel respond to it. Not always in the way that we want, not always to the degree that we want or to the level that we want, but our interventions, we believe, have had an impact, and we will continue to pursue them because we believe.
Okay.
No. You see, there's no accountability. They haven't done anything. I want you to hold on to what you're hearing from the State Department. This will be important when we get to Rwanda, because there's also this issue of the 6-year-old girl in Rafah. And I want you to hear the response about this. Matt Miller, when asked about the 6-year-old Hind Rajab killed in the aftermath of an Israeli attack. I have a little girl that is about to turn 6 myself. Listen to this. This is the story about there was a 6-year-old girl asking for help, calling out for help, where she was trapped under a car with family members. They killed this girl, 6-year-old child, a child. The 6-year-old child is not Hamas, okay? No matter what Israel will tell you or what the IDF will tell you, the babies who were killed in the hospital, who were the incubators, is not Hamas. I can't even believe that I have to say this. The fact that people have actually bought into this narrative and this rhetoric from this supremacist state. And some people actually have. Listen to what he says about the 6-year-old little girl.
On the killing of 6-year-old Hind Rajab after an Israeli tank targeted their family car in Gaza, the Geneva-based nonprofit Euromed Human Rights Monitor determined that the IDF is responsible for the bombing of the ambulance that attempted to rescue Hindi. And it also reported that American-made weapons was found at the bombed ambulance. Have you seen that report, and do you have any response?
So she's talking about the ambulance that was coming to try to rescue that 6-year-old little girl. They also bombed the ambulance. That's the thing. If you try to save or help anybody, they shoot you too. So that was the other thing. And she said there were American-made weapons that were found there. Listen to what he says.
Yeah, we are devastated about the reports of the death of Hind Rajab. I will tell you that I have a little girl that's about to turn 6 myself, and so it is just a devastating account, a heartbreaking account for this child, and of course there have been thousands of other children who have died as a result of this conflict.
Are you sure about that? Because I thought the State Department said that those numbers weren't confirmed. You see how they let things just slide? I thought the State Department and the president said that those numbers weren't confirmed, and those were the numbers that were reported by the Hamas Health Ministry, right? Now, all of a sudden, they agree that there's thousands of people. Pay attention to this, folks.
And every one of them is a tragedy that I can tell you everyone in the United States government feels quite deeply. We have asked the Israeli authorities to investigate this incident on an urgent basis. We understand that they are doing so. We expect to see those results on a timely fashion, and they should include accountability measures as appropriate.
And do you have anything to say on that? American-made weapons were found at the site.
I just don't. I'm not able to verify.
Is the U.S. assessing whether or not Israel is using that weapons in accordance with the laws of war?
We always expect that they use all weapons, whether they be provided by the United States.
But are you making an assessment on that?
Whenever it's crimes that are called out about Israel, notice the State Department is unable to verify, or I haven't seen that information.
Let me say, I think this is an important distinction because we get asked this question. Whether weapons are provided by the United States or that they have acquired through some other method, or whether they manufacture them themselves, it is our expectation that they use them in full compliance with the laws of war, and we engage with them on that matter. But I don't think I can offer you an assessment on this particular one, because as I've said, we've asked them to investigate, and they have said that they would do so. We want to see them do it as quickly as possible.
And we're supposed to take Israel at their word, but when it comes to the Palestinians, we can't take them at their word. You see this?
And I don't think I should speak to it before that investigation.
Have you heard back from the Israelis yet about the demolition of the university in Gaza?
Let me check and get back and get you an answer.
Or any of.
So you hear that? So he brought up the demolition of the university in Gaza? Because they've destroyed everything. Gaza is a mess. They've destroyed everything. There's no culture left there for the Palestinian people. And that's exactly what the state of Israel wanted, right? So he's asking him about the university that was demolished. Have you heard back from Israel about that? And he said, no, that university was demolished weeks ago. Now, you haven't heard back from them about the university, but you expect them to get back to you about this incident with the 6-year-old little girl in a timely fashion? No, the reality is they don't expect Israel to get back to them in a timely fashion. And if Israel doesn't respond, they're just going to shrug it anyway. Israel knows they don't have to do an investigation. Israel knows they don't have to be accountable to you. Israel knows this because even when it came to the accusations of sexual assault, Israel did not have to provide any investigation. They had no forensics, nothing. All they had to do was say that it happened. And the U.S. media continued to repeat the talking points. This is the double standard.
We have heard back from them on a number of different things that we raised with them.
Well, have you gotten anything definitive?
With respect to the specific one, let me find out and get you an answer.
Same
Always let me find out and get back to you.
Same question on Hindra Job, though, to follow up on, I think, what the point Matt was trying to make. You've said you've urged Israel to investigate her killing, respond very quickly, and take accountability if they find something's wrong. I think Matt's point, though, is that you've urged a lot of accountability, a lot of investigations, and we don't have evidence of them coming back with accountability. Should there be a second level investigation into her killing?
Again, it's hard to
not satisfied with what they
again. It's hard to comment on a second level before we've concluded the first level. We want to see the government of Israel investigate this matter. If they find that somebody behaved inappropriately or violation of law, we want to see accountability. And I wouldn't want to speculate on what further measures might be appropriate before that first step has been completed. With that, wrap for today. Thanks, everyone.
Word salad. Now, Corey, we can bring up the next set. Eric or Corey, which one are you in the background? We can bring up the part 2 of Type V and C. Let me tell you something, because I want to make a connection here to the genocide in Rwanda. The reason why I wanted you to see the State Department talking points, not yet, Eric, at the end, is because we've seen this before. Some of you may not be old enough to remember the genocide in Rwanda, but hold on. One second. Some of you may not be old enough to remember the genocide in Rwanda, and some of you may remember it. Either way, I want to show you something. Because when it comes to the State Department, you are going to see some similarities. Because look what I found. When we go back to Rwanda. So I tweeted this earlier today and I was like, wait a minute, hold up. I did a little bit of digging. Look what I found. State Department response to the Rwandan genocide. Notice they're saying the same thing now about Gaza. And I went on to say I would discuss this tonight. So this woman right here, this is Christine Shelley. So during the Rwandan genocide, she was the spokesperson for the State Department at that point in time. The gentleman at the beginning of this video is asking her, is there a genocide being committed in Rwanda? Listen to this. This is going to sound familiar, folks.
As to whether or not what is happening could be genocide.
Well, as I think you know, the use of the term genocide has a very precise legal meaning, although it's not strictly a legal determination. There are other factors in there as well. When in looking at a situation to make a determination about that, before we begin to use that term, we have to know as much as possible about the facts of the situation.
Out of curiosity, given that so many people.
Before we get to her response, notice what she did there. The word salad. Not really answering the question. You see that now with Gaza, the State Department doing the same thing. Madeleine Albright, See, Democracy Now!, they actually posted this 9 years ago on their channel.
Out of curiosity, given that so many people say that there is genocide underway or something that strongly resembles it, why wouldn't this convention be?
Well, I think, as you know, this becomes a legal definitional thing, unfortunately, in terms of as horrendous as all these things are, there becomes a definitional question.
As to whether or not what has happened.
You see that? Oh, we got to look at the definition of genocide. And to Lance's point, holy shit, it's literally the same script, right? They've always been doing this. It's not new. This is why I wanted to show you guys this. And it goes on more because I want to show you how, once again, just like with Gaza, with US supplying the weapons and letting Israel just do whatever the fuck they want to do with no accountability, the same thing for Rwanda. You'll see how the US was also complicit. America's secret role in the Rwandan genocide. I'm going to go to this part right here. The Rwanda genocide has been compared to the Nazi Holocaust in its surreal brutality, but there is a fundamental difference between these two atrocities. No Jewish army posed a threat to Germany. Hitler targeted the Jews and other weak groups solely because of his own demented beliefs and the prevailing prejudice at that time. The Rwandan Hutu genocidaires, as the people who killed during the genocide were known, were also motivated by irrational beliefs and prejudices. But the powder keg continued another important ingredient: terror. 3.5 years before the genocide, a rebel army of mainly Rwandan Tutsi exiles, known as the Rwandan Patriotic Front, or RPF, had invaded Rwanda and set up camps in the northern mountains. They had been armed and trained by neighboring Uganda, which continued to supply them throughout the ensuing civil war in violation of the UN Charter, Organization of African Unity rules, various Rwandan ceasefire and peace agreements. Now, here's the US part. During this period, officials at the U.S. Embassy in Kampala knew that the weapons were crossing the border, and the CIA knew that the rebels' growing military strength was escalating ethnic tensions within Rwanda to such a degree that hundreds of thousands of Rwandans might die in widespread ethnic violence. However, and this is the part you need to see, Washington not only ignored Uganda's assistance to the Rwandan rebels, it also ramped up military and development aid to Museveni and then hailed him as a peacemaker once the genocide was underway. We have seen this script before. And although the US government, the Biden administration, although they are saying, Netanyahu, you need to follow the rules of war, they're not actually enforcing it. And Israel knows they can do what they want to do because the politicians in this country are owned by the Israeli lobby. The majority of them are. So it got to the point, even with Rwanda, Bill Clinton had to admit that he was wrong to ignore the genocide in Rwanda. This is why I see the same patterns continuing to repeat. Do you guys realize it wasn't until Donald Trump's presidency that the United States government actually admitted that the Armenian genocide was real and happened? Do you guys realize this? That's how long it took for them to admit it. And I see us playing the same script over and over and over again. So now you see Bill Clinton. Listen to what he said about Rwanda.
Rwanda, where if we'd gone in sooner, I believe we could have saved at least a third of the lives that were lost. Remember, they died in a hurry. 90 days, machetes. Back then, we didn't have a real presence in Africa. We didn't have the ability to. It would have taken a while to mobilize and go there. But if we just, been 10,000 of a global contingent of 20 and fanned out, we probably could have saved 300,000 of those people's lives. it had an enduring impact on me.
You see history repeating itself? Think about all the people that could have been saved in Gaza if the United States would have acted sooner and held Israel accountable. But have we learned anything? Apparently not. Apparently, when it comes to the genocide in Rwanda, and even though Bill Clinton made that statement after the fact, it is obvious that we really have not learned anything, especially when the genocide is being committed against a group of people that the US government has no foreign interest with. We have to remember the US has foreign interests with Israel. What does everyone keep telling you? Israel is important for our national security. I'm going to change that too. Israel is important because there's the oil. And that's why the US has to have this pact with them, the oil, the resources, etc. And because when you hear people say Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East, what they're really saying is it's not a Muslim state in the Middle East. They also don't want a secular state in the Middle East. People understand this? The US government does not want a secular state in the Middle East. They don't even want the secular states to have democracy in countries in Africa. That's why they killed Gaddafi. Because that affects US interests. The Palestinians in Gaza do not affect US interest. There's nothing they really want or are getting from the Palestinian people. So the US government serves and protects the people that they can benefit from. And you'll see the same thing in this video. Have we learned anything from Rwanda?
Carlton professor Alan Thompson reported on Rwanda's aftermath extensively.
Well, the problem is we don't cover countries like Rwanda. We didn't do it then in '94, and we don't do it now. The fog of war made it very difficult for the journalists who were on the ground to understand exactly what they were seeing. And it literally took a few weeks or longer before anyone called it what it really was, and that was genocide.
The United Nations and Belgium had forces in Rwanda, but the UN mission was not given a mandate to intervene. Canada led the UN peacekeeping mission at the time.
We just have not established that criteria that all humans count, and not just the ones that meet our self-interest.
Boom. There it is. There it is. We never really established that all humans count. It's just about the ones that meet our interest. There it is.
In the aftermath of the genocide, blame was cast not only on governments for the lack of international intervention, but also on the lack of media coverage. But have we learned anything since then?
25 years later, I'm not convinced that we're doing any better job of helping people to understand what's happening in complex environments like Rwanda. If Rwanda were to unfold today, I'm just not convinced that we would do any better as journalists.
That's why Tom.
You hear that? This video was posted 4 years ago. So obviously before October 7th, and he was right. We really didn't learn anything. You don't believe me? You can see the hypocrisy of who we really care about and who we don't care about. We pretend to care about them, but we let them continue to die. I'm not asking the US government to intervene militarily. I'm asking them to hold Israel accountable, God damn it. And it seems like South Africa and Nicaragua and Indonesia seem to be the only ones that have the guts to stand up to the supremacist state. And you'll see the difference of who they care about and how they care about them in this video with John Kirby. John Kirby was almost in tears when he discussed Ukrainian civilians being killed. So you're going to see a difference here. This is John Kirby in this video. The first part, he's going to talk about the Ukrainians dying. Then you're going to see how he responds to the Palestinians dying. Listen to this.
It's hard to look at what he's doing in Ukraine, what his forces are doing in Ukraine, and think that any ethical, moral individual could justify that. It's difficult to look at the It's difficult to look at some of the images and imagine that any well-thinking, serious, mature leader would do that.
Okay, so he's almost in tears here when talking about the Ukrainian children, the Ukrainian civilians, right?
So I can't talk to his psychology, but I think we can all speak to his depravity.
This is war. It is combat. It is bloody. It is ugly, and it's going to be messy.
Now he's talking about the Palestinians. See the change of tone? No empathy, no sympathy, no compassion for the Palestinian people. But you almost in tears when you're talking about the Ukrainian people.
And innocent civilians are going to be hurt going forward. I wish I could tell you something different. I wish that that wasn't going to happen. But it is going to happen. And that doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it dismissible. It doesn't mean that we aren't going to still express concerns about that and do everything we can to help the Israelis do everything they can to minimize it. But that's unfortunately the nature of conflict.
When it's about the Palestinian kids dying, it's just the nature of conflict. Listen, honey, and we're going to do call-in tonight. This country, as I told you before, if they're not getting anything from another country, they don't give a damn about those people. I would argue they don't care about the Ukrainian people either. But notice how they can show that sympathy and compassion. Our government has been playing us for quite a long time. And I had to show you about Rwanda so that you can see they are repeating the same talking points from over 30 years ago. This is the State Department's job. This is what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to make you think we're about to do something without really doing any damn thing. They're not going to try to help those people. And had it not even been for the pressure that's coming from the outside, people in the streets, those of us that have been protesting, you wouldn't even be hearing this. Wouldn't even hear it. We don't have to put up with this because at the end of the day, I'm going to tell you one thing. One thing that you can do starting this year, stop voting for the same people who continue to support these types of atrocities. Everybody's shown their whole ass now. Since October 7th, you look up and see how they voted. You know, very few have voted against Israel. You remember that come November, whether it's a state election or it's for the election of the president of the United States. Because I'll be damned if anybody's going to come to me and tell me that you need to support Joe Biden because else we might get Donald Trump. Not my problem, boo. Not my problem. I don't support genocide. And that's how I look at it. And I'm going to keep it real. If you are voting for them, you are supporting genocide. That is what is happening here. So you got some options. You can vote the couch 2024, or you can vote for the third party independent candidates that are running against genocide in 2024. Those are your options, folks. Those are your options. But I wouldn't even dare tell somebody, well, you might get Donald Trump. And I don't care what state you live in. I don't care if you're in a swing state. I don't care what state you live in. Nobody should make you feel ashamed because you don't go out there and support this genocidal maniac, this simp for a state that is killing all those damn people. No one should make you feel that way. And if they try to make you feel that way, you tell them fall all the way back. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you, Jay. You'll have a better chance to contact Mayor Johnson than us, the folks who actually live here. We are already on his neck about the migrant issue. Interesting. Thank you, P. Smith. Money, gas. In Gaza, Russia's rich in natural resources. Lawrence says, sternly worded warning message followed by more weapons. There you go. EMK says rule 1 of Sabby Club, stop voting for two-party clowns. Bingo. That's it. That's it. Thank you, Stop Sniffing Kids Joe. I'm back on this account. The Oracle says there have been virtually no genocidal events in the 20th century forward that the U.S. has not had a hand in. Vietnam, Indonesia, Palestine, Haiti, the Congo, Rwanda, Iraq, etc. There you go. There's one common denominator. Thank you, Jojo. May Hin Rajab and other Gazan soul find peace. Thank you for that. Thank you, Jamal. About the Israel apologists, some of the comments on X are heinous. I've already banned for 12 hours for cussing out Zionists. Yeah. And Elon is supporting Israel, by the way. He's out there banning accounts that he's told to ban that are pro-Palestinian. Kill Your Glory says, Sabby down the rabbit hole. I did go down there. I did. Thank you, Andre. People keep asking me to vote for Biden, but it's too bitter of a pill to swallow. This is not the democracy we need. Israel is the hill that Biden's will have democracy died on. Thank you for the super sticker, Can Dan. And thank you for the super sticker as well, Can Dan. Thank you, Jay. John Kirby, it hurts my soul that my fellow white folks are being killed in Ukraine. Also, John Kirby, brown folks being mass murdered, meh. Thank you for the super sticker, Yantra Mandala. Thank you, David. Couch 2024 has a strong platform. That's a good one, David. Thank you for the super sticker, Christine. And thank you for the super sticker, Roger. No couch or politician Sabby, vote the ballot initiatives. That's right. Let's go ahead and look at that poll. So I did ask you guys if you thought that Israel was intentionally attacking Rafah with the timing here. Was the timing of Israel's attack on Rafah intentional? There are 943 votes. 89% of you said yes. 2% said no. And 10% said you are not sure. So again, I always appreciate it when people admit that they're not sure about something. You know, it's like the kid in the class that doesn't want to raise his hand and say, I don't know. Or like the teacher calls on them, they'll just say something. And the teacher's like, if you don't know, just say you don't know. That kind of thing. All right. Thank you guys so much for that. And we are moving on to our next story. We're going to do call in tonight because we got some things to talk about. Professor Richard Wolff is pretty based. He actually interviewed Michael Hudson recently. Michael Hudson is also an economist. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with him, but he's pretty based too. So you got two based people having an interview about economic apartheid in the United States. We're going to get into the thick of it. But first and foremost, if you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. That helps me with the algorithm. If you are new, don't forget to sub and share. Let's move on. Professor Richard Wolff and Michael Hudson, economic apartheid. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been covering a lot of history tonight. You're going to get a little bit more history with this story as well, because we need to talk about the economic divide that we have in this country. And I don't just mean people who are working class and people who are rich, etc. We need to talk about another type of divide that we have economically in this country. Listen to this, and then I'm going to back this up with some receipts.
Michael Hudson is a distinguished research professor of economics at the University of Missouri in Kansas City. He's also, and this makes him quite unusual, an honorary professor of economics at, and here please, I apologize for my pronunciation, Huazhong University of Science and Technology, usually known by its acronym HUST, located in Wuhan in the People's Republic of China. He has written so many books and articles that if I were to try to list them here, it would exhaust the time that we have. And I know that you're all more interested in hearing what he has to say than looking at all his very many impressive credentials. He specializes in areas of debt, finance, neoliberalism, and he has a particular interest in Middle Eastern economic history that gives his work a kind of grounding in the realities. He's also worked for major American banks, and so brings in a wealth of experience to the analyses he offers.
Long story short, Michael did a lot.
So first of all, Michael Hudson, thank you very much for giving us your time and your expertise.
Well, I appreciate being here.
Okay, I'm going to start off with something I know has struck many of your audiences because they've spoken to me about it. You have characterized the United States economy as comprising a kind of apartheid. What exactly do you mean? And here what I'm after is, what would stimulate you to use a term as loaded as that, associated with the history of South Africa in ways most of us know, to describe the U.S. economy?
Well, apartheid is basically economic polarization that excludes one part of the population from economic growth. And economically, today's economy is polarizing between the 1% and the 99%, as a lot of people are saying. But more precisely, this polarization is between creditors and debtors. The 99% of the population are the debtors, and the debt is growing, and paying this debt sucks up their income to the very top of the economic pyramid. What makes it apartheid?
Pause there for a second. So what does that tell you about the system, ladies and gentlemen? Most of us are debtors, right? And you may sit there and say, well, I'm not in debt, but I don't know, you got bills? Because like, you know, it doesn't have to be like student loan debt, but like if you have credit card bills, some people have medical debt, right? So there's different types of debt that you can have. But what he's telling you is the majority of us are debtors. Who do you think is doing the most in this country in reference to financial well-being? The creditors are the ones who are doing really well, because the creditors do not exist without the debtors. So it's almost like the creditors need people to be in some type of debt in order for them to make money. They profit off of us being in debt, ladies and gentlemen. Let me let him continue about the apartheid piece.
Is that it's hereditary. And it's become so really in the decades after the return to peace in 1945. This financial polarization is largely concerns about real estate. And that's why I focus on 1945. Back then, everybody was able to return to peace and get a home. And all they had to do was pay 25% of their income. They would get a mortgage and they would end a home. And the homes that the population got in 1945 have all been bequeathed to their sons, their grandchildren, and this homeownership.
Pause. Okay, he's talking about hereditary. He's also talking about establishing some type of generational wealth. So for all the people that were able to buy homes in 1945, imagine like only 25% of your income. That's definitely not the case today. It's definitely not the case today. Thinking about passing on those homes to other people in the generation as time goes by. Who do you think was left out of that equation? Remember, home ownership is one of the greatest resources that you can have in reference to some type of wealth and net worth. And net worth is what you own minus what you owe. So if you don't owe anything, let's say you have no student loans or whatever, and you have home ownership, your net worth is probably significantly high, right? Regardless of your income, your net worth could still be high. But if you owe, say you have a lot of debt and you don't have any type of home ownership, your net worth is probably going to be significantly lower, right? Some people could be in the negative. Who do you think were excluded from that? Let's go to the chat. Let's see. Participation. Participation is making me wait. Lana said, except for a lot of black people. There you go. Bad Cookie said, not just black folks, Sabby, minorities in a whole. That's true. All right, you guys are already on it. Let's continue.
Has been hereditary, but only for white people, not really for black people. And that's where the apartheid was. From 1945 until almost 1990, almost 2000, the black population could not get mortgages. There was redlining. So the result is that the white population was able to buy affordable housing when you only pay 25% of your income on housing, on mortgage payments, or on rent. You can afford to buy goods and services.
Pause. Okay. He brought up a key term, which is redlining. This is significantly important because oftentimes I've heard people who are Democrats say, yes, I want a Democrat like FDR. And I would push back on that and say, no, I want something better. This is something I kind of noticed from like progressives. Why we always settle for less? like, why don't we aim higher? Why do we always try to settle for something that we've already had instead of asking for something even more? And we can have nice things, but you got to address some of these issues. And we'll come back to this video. Before he gets into all of that, I want to show you some of these issues because I talked about this on this show one time before, and some people got really upset because I said this about FDR. Honey, I read the history, okay? You should not stand for people, whether it was FDR, whether it was Bernie Sanders, etc. The history does not lie about this. Plus, I have family members in my family that went through this. So let's take a look at the history when it comes to redlining and where that came from. A forgotten history of how the U.S. government segregated America. Now, this was covered 2016. It's important for people to see. Highlight this. In 1933, faced with a housing shortage, the federal government began a program explicitly designed to increase and segregate America's housing stock. Author Richard Rothstein says the housing programs begun under the New Deal were tantamount to a state-sponsored system of segregation. Who was the New Deal from? That was FDR's New Deal. See, a lot of times people like to talk about, well, Republicans are going to do this to black people, and as if Democrats didn't do these things to black people as well. That's what I want you to understand. Both sides have done this. It goes on to say here, the government's efforts were primarily designed to provide housing to white, middle-class, lower-middle-class families. African Americans and other people of color were left out of the new suburban communities and pushed instead into urban housing projects. And this brings up another issue. Why were they prevented from getting in? Number one problem was the banks. The banks were not willing to give loans to those populations, so they could never get into the community in the first place. They were already had the door closed in their face with the loan issue. You couldn't get the loan from the banks. So they were making sure that you stayed in the inner cities, which then developed more poverty. Why did it develop more poverty? Because when the white families, those upper, lower middle class white families, when they left those cities, white flight, and they moved into those suburban areas, they took their wealth with them. Now you pivot to the education issue. When we talk about public school education in this country, it's funded by property taxes. So if the people that have the wealth, the most wealth, leave that area and move somewhere else, that means that is funds that is taken away from resourcing those public schools, and those schools become under-resourced schools. People don't want to teach at those schools. You see where I'm going with this. It goes on to say a little bit more here. Rothstein's book, The Color of Law, examines the local, state, and federal housing policies that mandated segregation. He notes that the Federal Housing Administration, which was established in 1934, furthered the segregation efforts by refusing to insure mortgages in and near African American neighborhoods, a policy known as redlining. At the same time, the FHA was subsidizing builders who were mass producing entire subdivisions for whites with the requirement that none of those homes be sold to African Americans. This is another example where African Americans, also some of the policies under the New Deal affected indigenous communities as well, by the way, were left out of opportunities that would have created generational wealth. We know how this works in the education system. Your zip code means a lot in reference to where you can go from there. So if you are at an under-resourced school, it is going to be more difficult for you to get into a college. Your grades are more likely to be lower because it's under-resourced. You may not have the best teachers. This is just the reality of the situation, kids. So if you're not getting into college, then you're limited in reference to job prospects that pay more money. It's not to say no one from those areas got out and was able to make a lot of money, but it wasn't the norm. Thus, again, limiting your ability to create and establish generational wealth for your own damn family. Let's get back to the interview, because he says much, much more. Bring it home, Michael.
And that low price of housing was really what spurred the economic takeoff until the 1980s, when things were changed. But the Black population was left out of it. Finally, they began to be accepted back into it around 2000, 2008. And by
2000, 2008, Black people were finally accepted back into it. Guys, that's decades later. That's decades later. And then what happened in 2008? The housing crisis.
2008, you had a rise finally in Black and Hispanic homeownership, but there was one problem. They had to pay much higher interest rates than white people. And the banks charged them much more of their income than 25%.
That part right there. Nick, my comrade from RBN, he used to work at a car dealership. He used to sell cars. One of the things that Nick told us about is that even when it comes to buying a car, he would see how they would charge Black people more interest than the white customers that would come in. So once again, now they let you in, say you got an opportunity, come on in. The banks, we're going to give you more loan. We're going to be more generous with the loans now. But then they charge you more interest. And by the way, that's regardless if you have good credit. FYI.
Even today, long after 2008, people have to pay up to 43% of their income for rent. That's the level at which the government guarantees the banks that there's going to be a repayment. So people who now are beginning to buy homes for the first time have their budget squeezed. It's very hard to pay the 43% of your income, especially when you're also having to pay student debt and bank credit card credit and automobile loans. So the result is that when families who do, white families as well now, even if they are able to get access to a bank loan to buy homes of their own, they have to pay so much student debt as a result of getting an education to get a job, to earn the income to pay the loan, that the banks say, I'm sorry, you don't have enough money left after the student loans to qualify for a bank loan. And so the result is that home ownership rates in America are dropping. Real estate is being bought by large private capital real estate companies.
Pause right here. I'll go back a little bit. Pause right here. You know what he shows you here? Now things have changed, because now you see that white people are also being affected by the economy, and not just Joe Biden's economy, but in general, because of them raising the rates, the percentage of your income that you have to pay for just for rent. Just fall back from home ownership for a second, but just to rent an apartment. How many people, you know how many people I know in their 30s, some in their 40s, they got multiple roommates, not because they want to, because they can't afford to live by themselves. So now you see, once this started to increase and there's a lot of student loan debt, now you're starting to see this is where now it's starting to affect white people as well. So now we got an issue when it comes to class across racial lines. And not just working class, even middle class people, honestly, are struggling at this point in time. So now you hear about it more because now people of different races are also experiencing it. Now you have people that are part of the majority that are experiencing this as well. Now he gets into this part here about these companies. Let me go back here that are buying up. This is really important, guys. This is why apartments, the rent for these apartments are incredibly high. This is part of the reason and why some of these homes are high. Listen to this.
Student debt is a result of getting an education to get a job, to earn the income to pay the loan, that the banks say, I'm sorry, you don't have enough money left after the student loans to qualify for a bank loan. And so the result is that home ownership rates in America are dropping. Real estate is being bought by large private capital real estate companies. And the result is that rent is going way up. And anyone who has to live in a major city or even the smaller cities finds that the rents are going up so much that, as far as they're concerned, that's the real inflation that's taking place. The inflation.
Pause right there. Okay. So you see that, right? We have it here in Massachusetts. It may be happening in your state too, I'm sure. But all of these private investors that come in and they buy an entire apartment building, the whole damn building, and then they renovate the apartment building. Now, all of a sudden, instead of affordable housing, it's luxury condos or luxury apartments. The apartments are smaller. They think we all want to live in a box. I don't know what that's about. They think we all want to live in a box. They want us to have less. You noticing this? They want us to have less. So they buy these buildings. They jack the rent up. And that's why a lot of you have to have more than one roommate. Now, what can be done about this? Number one, there needs to be some type of law in your city or your state that is outlawing private investors from coming into the city and buying an entire apartment build, like buying these commercial real estate. Like, stop. They should not be able to buy residential buildings. If we can stop that, then we can get somewhere. But as long as they're coming in and they're buying those residential buildings, they can increase the rent as much as they want, depending on where you live. Boston has no rent stability. So landlords can increase the rent as much as they want, whether it's $20, whether it's $200.
In housing prices, the inflation in education prices, the inflation that basic needs that they have to cover are so high that it's pushed America into an economic recession that really began in 2008 when President Obama broke his promise to write down the junk mortgages to the realistic real estate value. The banks had been very predatory towards low-income borrowers, especially Black and Hispanic borrowers. For the first time,
That's right. Barack Obama. I want to remind you that Black wealth tanked under Barack Obama. I'm no kid, man. All because of his economic policies after the housing crisis. Instead of bailing out old Black elders, and there were some white people that were scammed by this too, but the majority they were targeting was older Black elders who lost their homes. Instead of bailing out those people, he chose to bail out the banks. And so that is part of the reason why Black wealth tanked under Barack Obama. So almost in a sense, after 2008, it's almost like you had to start all over again and try to build generational wealth.
Willing to pay much higher portions of their income for mortgages, but it turned out not only did they have higher rates, but the banks falsified the prices of the property being sold. They added all sorts of charges on there. And the result has been that this polarization between creditors and debtors that's hurting the whole economy has taken on a racial coloration in the United States. And that's why I call it apartheid. But you could say that the apartheid really is between creditors and debtors in general, is the whole economy is strapped for debt.
You know, I'm struck, just as a footnote to what you say. Last week, Harvard University, which has a joint center on housing, studies housing, and has been doing it for years, they issue an annual report. And I read it last week, and it begins with a really stunning statistic for the year 2024. 1/2 of all renters in the United States are paying rents that they cannot afford. They keep track of what you were calling the share of income that housing absorbs. And by using that metric, that measure, half of the people are paying more than they can afford, which means they're not taking care of medical expenses or educational expenses or any of the other expenses in order to keep a roof literally over their heads.
Those things fall by the wayside and you have to pay for your rent. I know, because I've been through that. Those things fall by the wayside. So if that means that you're not going to opt in for the 401k at your job, that's more money out of your paycheck. So you're less likely to do it. In fact, that's another thing that has come out. A lot of the younger people, Gen Z generation, and some millennials too, are less likely to sign up for 401ks at their employer, because that's money that they want to keep within their paycheck because they just can't afford it. That's another thing. Are they going to have any type of retirement fund? Are we going to actually receive Social Security? Let me ask you guys a question. Be honest. Do you think millennials, those of us that are millennials and Gen Z, do you think we're actually going to receive Social Security by the time we're of age to do so? I don't know. I doubt it. I doubt it. So it's not like we can rely on that. And if people aren't signing up for 401ks, are people going to have any type of retirement put aside? Do they want us to work until we're 80 years old? Nikki Haley already threatened, and she thought this was a good thing, to increase the retirement age. They want us to keep working. Worker bees.
All right, let me move to another but very related question. There's widespread agreement among people doing rather different theoretical approaches to economics that over recent decades in the United States, the distribution of wealth and income has become much more unequal. That 40 years ago, the United States was not the extreme outlier when compared, say, to Western Europe that it is now, in the sense of that kind of inequality. So my first two parts of this question: do you agree with this assessment? And if you do, what solutions would you come up with? How would you deal with a situation like this if indeed you find it to be the case?
Well, I'm basically an economic statistician, and all of the statistics explain quite clearly why the economy is becoming more unequal. And my book, Killing the Host, explains why. And the reason is that debt grows exponentially. It grows by compound interest and an upsweep, but income doesn't grow that fast. So debt is growing much faster than the whole economy. And that means that more and more of corporate income, of people's income, and even government income has to be paid for debt service to the financial class. So as long as more and more income is not spent on goods and services, not spent on hiring labor, not spent on building factories, as long as the economy is deindustrializing, it's going to polarize. And the economy is deindustrializing because it's become a high-cost economy because of debt. a house is worth whatever a bank is going to lend. And banks have lent more and more, increasing housing. Banks lend for corporate takeovers, and they create monopolies. And monopolies are rising prices and just sucking the income out of the economy. And what economists in the 19th century used to call this economic rent. Rent is unearned income. So when you say that the economy is polarizing to the upper 1%, and you look at what are these people doing to get all this income?
Pause. What are those people doing to get all that income? You know what I've noticed over the years, and this is something I had to learn. Seems like a lot of times the people who make the most money actually do the least amount of work. They found a way to make more money by getting other people to do the work for them. That's all your billionaires, folks. That's your Taylor Swift. That's your Jay-Z. That's your Elon Musk. This is not to say these people did no work, but they realize that they actually could make more money if they got other people to do the work for them. This is why you can work very hard and you could be a dedicated worker. And then you look at your paycheck and you're like, damn, this is all I got. And then you think about what you have left after you paid your rent or you paid your mortgage. You're like, damn, it's like I'm working over 40 hours a week. This is all I'm left with. It has gotten to the point now where people have felt like they have to have a second income. And I know several people that do. People call this a hustle culture. That's not something to brag about. You should not have to have multiple jobs in a country that has billions of dollars to give to Ukraine and billions of dollars to give to Israel. You see, it doesn't have to be like this, folks. We can have nice things, but we have to demand it. And after the past 2 years, our government cannot come to us and tell us that they don't have the money when we watch billions of dollars go out the damn door to other countries, okay? We know they have the money. It does not have to be this way. But you have to believe that it doesn't have to be this way. Stop listening, believing the politicians when they tell you that they can't afford it. It costs too high. We have a high debt ceiling. The debt ceiling is a myth. Modern monetary theory teaches you that. That's something that they come up with so they can make excuses as to not to give you no damn money. But they can give other people money. So we got to see past what they're doing here. We got to understand, again, the politicians are puppets. They're puppets for the top 1%. So even though we're the ones that vote for them, once they're in office, they don't serve us. They serve the people at the top. And if they want to keep those seats, they continue to serve the people at the top and they continue to serve donors and lobbyists. And that's how they get to where they are. That's how they stay there. That's how someone like Nancy Pelosi can stay in office that long. And that's why we spend so much time working hard and it feels like we never seem to get ahead. It's not you. It's the system.
They're not acting productively. They don't make their wealth by investing in plant and equipment because we're deindustrializing. They certainly don't make their wealth by saving their wages. They make it by capital gains. In other words, by economic bubble, by banks creating a financial bubble, pushing up stock market prices, pushing up bond prices with the Federal Reserve's quantitative easing. So the 10% of the population owes almost 80% of all of the stocks and bonds. So this 10% is getting very wealthy, and they say, we're doing fine, the economy's us, the economy's doing fine. But people who don't have stocks and bonds and have to depend on what they earn are left behind. Well, if debt is causing the problem, what's the solution? There really is no way of reversing this economic polarization and making the economy more equal without wiping out a lot of the debt, wiping out the student debt, wiping out the bad real estate debt that individuals have, not business debts, but wiping out personal debt.
Wiping out debt. Now, some people will push back on this and say, no, you took out those loans, go ahead and, pay them. But what people need to understand is all of the people in the United States that have, hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt, most of them are never going to be able to pay all of it off like before they're dead. Let's just be honest. That is holding everybody else back. Think about this, folks. If Joe Biden would have wiped out all the student loan debt, do you realize how the economy would have benefited from that? People wouldn't have been able to buy homes. Then people can come up with the down payment on a home while they still can, right? That would actually benefit. When we talk about giving African-American descendants of slavery, we talk about giving reparations. People say that's not fair. The money's just going to go to them. First of all, you don't come to me about fair because they didn't give this to other people in this country. But two, do you understand that that would also be good for the economy? Everybody would benefit in the end. That's the thing. But we can't get there because we have people still trying to polarize and say, this person got something that I didn't get. This person got da-da-da-da. Look at who's at the bottom. And a lot of times we talk about equality, we need to talk about equity. Because if I have two people in front of me, and let's say Paul has $10, and let's say Alyssa has $5, and I want to be equal. I want to give everybody the same. So I give $100 to Paul and Alyssa. Paul already had $10. Now he has $110. Alyssa had $5. She has $105. But there's still equality because I gave both of them $100. But that's not equity. And that's what we need to talk about more. Equity. And once we can get into that conversation, then we can talk about making some real change. I'm not against equality, but equality without equity doesn't mean anything for people who are at the bottom. That's something to think about. Something to think about. I think that we finished with, there's one more part. Sorry.
And the good thing about wiping out the personal debt is this wipes out the savings of the 1%. The savings of the 1% are lent out to the 99%. And if you're going to save the 99% for debt, that means writing down all of this sucking up of economic rent, of capital gains, of financialization that have accrued only to the 1% or top percent of the population. Well, another solution is to realize that housing should be a human right. There has to be a lot of housing, and housing should be made available today for everyone. White, black, everyone basically should be able to have housing for 25% of their income. Those are the two major solutions to the problem.
Yes, and
that's pretty much the end of that there. Everyone should be guaranteed a roof over their head. We talk about needs. I'm not talking about wants. People need shelter. People need food. People need clothing. There are some people who are nudist colonies that would disagree with that. And they'll say, forget those damn clothes. But I would say people need clothing. Just keeping it real. But yeah, we should have these things. And like I said, this country has billions of dollars. Billions of dollars. Let's go to some of the comments here and we'll get to our last story. Rolf says, Michael is the great analyst of the USA empire. Interesting. Thank you for the super chat. Pineapple. Sabby, tomorrow is the Hawaiian celebration, Captain Cook's Unalived Day. Down imperialism, down with colonialism, down with racism. Free Hawaii, free Congo, free Palestine. Thank you for letting me know about that. Thank you. None of your business. Reverse mortgages are a way to take minority wealth. None of your business also says you will own nothing and be happy. Thank you, DC. The government stole my dad's home and sold it at an auction without his knowledge or consent. He was never compensated despite having paid off the mortgage. See how our government does us? This is crazy. Thank you for this as well. Hashtag rent is taxation. Hashtag taxation is theft. Hashtag rent is theft. Thank you. None of your business. Even churches convince people to tax the 1% is theft. And thank you for this, DC. MMT equals how children view economics, devalues currency. Thank you, David. It's ultimately about giving people purchasing power. I understood this as a kid when 2008 happened. Made no damn sense to me then, and it doesn't now. Well said. We're going to move into this Tucker Carlson story because I do want to do call in tonight. So we're going to go ahead and touch on this. So Tucker Carlson actually is finally speaking out since that interview that he had with Vladimir Putin. There's a couple of things in this conversation that I do want to highlight. I don't want to spend too much time on this because I know his stuff can have copyright if you play it for too long. But there's a couple of things I do want to highlight, one of them being at the very beginning of the interview. He's finally talking about why he did what he did. And let's hear his take about this. Let's go ahead and bring him in here.
I'll start in reverse order. Why now? Well, I've been trying for 3 years to do this interview. The U.S. government prevented me from doing it by spying on my text messages and leaking them to the New York Times. And that spooked the Russian government into canceling the interview. So I've been trying to do this, but my country's intel services were working against me illegally, and that enraged me because I'm an American citizen. I'm 54, I pay my taxes, I obey the law. And there was no expectation in the America that I grew up in that my government and its intel services, NSA and CIA, which were always outwardly focused on our foreign enemies, would be turned inward against American citizens. And
Okay, that part right there. Yeah, so I don't understand why Tucker Carlson was surprised about that, considering the history of intel and government agencies in this country. So I'm not sure if he was surprised that it happened to him per se, because he is a journalist, or because it happened at all. So I'll give a couple examples. The Black Panthers, Malcolm X, MLK, JFK. I could go on. If we want to talk about even people that don't live in this country that the US government had their hands in silencing, Julian Assange, Mumia Abu-Jamal, Daniel Hale. So this part, right off the jump, this part really surprised me because I was like, why is he shocked by that? And how could he have missed that? All along the way, these government agencies have always targeted those types of people. They came after the Black Panthers because the Black Panthers realized the government wasn't going to work for them and that they were going to defend themselves and they were going to arm themselves. But the Black Panthers started the free breakfast program. So when you hear about free breakfast at public schools, that actually started with the Black Panthers. They did mutual aid. They took care of people in their community. They built clinics. So they were a threat. The US government saw them as a threat. The FBI saw them as a threat. Malcolm X, it wasn't until Malcolm X started to say, okay, maybe the way we've been doing things have been wrong. Maybe we need to change things a little bit, maybe pull the violence back, and maybe it's not right, and maybe we need to unite with people. Once he started talking about let's uniting, they killed Malcolm X. They killed MLK after MLK started talking about uniting the workers, and he talked about reparations. Then they came for MLK. When he took the focus off of race and started to focus on class, that was when they said, nope, gotta go. They killed JFK. I think we all agree to this, that they killed JFK. Okay, they killed JFK after he pushed back on the state of Israel because he did not agree with Israel building nuclear weapons. And he asked over and over to go to the facility and see the weapons. And he never got to see it because they killed him. He didn't want to implement some of the foreign policy measures that the CIA wanted him to implement. So they killed him. I just didn't understand, Tuck. I didn't understand how you sat back and thought that this could not happen to you. Let me go on.
I'm shocked by that, and I'm infuriated by that. And so once I discovered that that was happening, and I confirmed it was happening, and they admitted that they did it, then I was totally determined, monomaniacally dedicated to doing this interview, not simply because I want to know what Vladimir Putin is like and what he thinks about a war that is resetting the world and really gravely damaging my country's economy, but also because they told me I couldn't on the basis of illegitimate means and for no really clearly stated justification. And I thought that can't stand. I want to live in a free country. I was born in one. And I'm going to do whatever small thing I can do to maintain, the society that I love.
I don't even think that it's so much a free country anymore because they're trying to censor, like you can't, there's certain things I can't even say on this platform, certain things I can't show you on this platform that are not hateful. I just can't because who's running the show at Google? Like they don't even, the African, People's Socialist Party, they can't even be free to help people within their community because the DOJ is trying to accuse them of being in cahoots with Russia. You can't even, you can't really criticize Ukraine. So when we look at the censorship issue, I don't even think that this is a free country anymore. That's the thing. Why do all of us have to be on multiple platforms? Because the censorship issue. How many people have you seen over the past couple of years that have been kicked off platforms, demonetized, etc., because of the censorship issue? One of the best freedoms that we're supposed to have in this country is the freedom of speech. And even that is being taken away. We're going to fast forward a little bit here.
Coming to fruition in November. I have no idea what's going to happen. I think that the current administration is very obviously incompetent and the president is senile. That's not an attack. Everyone knows it. It has now been confirmed, I would say, this week in the report that you're all familiar with. But and that's very sad, but it had sort of nothing to do with the interview. I wanted to interview Putin because he's the leader of a country that the U.S. government is sort of at war with, though not in a declared way.
Sir,
And one thing I will add, too, is that he did try to do this interview when he was still working at Fox News. I guess they weren't really having that.
Your President Biden,
yes, I do.
You've been working in several media organizations from PBS, CNBC, MSNBC, Fox News, CNN, and you've been covering this field well, and you know the American politicians. And now you've been following Putin, and you did a very lengthy interview with this gentleman. And for sure, to interview him, you did your homework and you did your research. Comparing the culture, the competence between Vladimir Putin and Biden. How do you see the two men now running the world?
I mean, if this were boxing, the fight would be called by the medic. And I say that as an American, and I don't have another passport. I don't plan to ever leave my country. My family's been there hundreds of years, and I love it. I am a patriotic American.
So see, it's important for him to say that because the moment you go to Russia, or obviously he interviewed Vladimir Putin, so that's a little bit different. They start to see you as a Putin puppet. They start to say, oh, you're actually working for Russia. Look at what happened to Tara Reid. Tara Reid went to Russia to promote her book, which was actually being written in different languages. That's why she actually went there. But then she ended up getting stuck there because she was informed by Matt Gaetz that if she came back to the United States, she would be detained. Now, all of a sudden, they start calling her a Putin puppet or she's a Russian propagandist and things like that. So it's important that Tucker Carlson said that he likes this country. He's not looking to move to another country because they'll try to do that to him, too. And I understand Tucker Carlson comes from a pretty wealthy family. He's a Swanson, if I'm not mistaken. So he comes from a pretty wealthy family. But even though he comes from that, the interview of Vladimir Putin will still give the deep state pause, right? So they're even starting to attack and come after him.
And I grieve when I see that the president is non compos menis, and that in my country, it is considered very rude to say that. And you sort of wonder, how did you get to a place where you have an incompetent president who's driven not simply the standard of living, but life expectancy downward, and no one feels free to say that? That's not a political observation. It's a statement of fact, which is provable empirically. And the most radicalizing thing I would just say for me in the 8 days I spent in Moscow was not simply the leader of the country, who of course is impressive. It's the largest landmass in the world. And it's wildly diverse, linguistically, culturally, religiously. It's hard to run a country like that for 24 years, whether you like it or not. So an incapable person couldn't do that. He is very capable, and many of you know him, and you know that.
This is something similar to what Tara Reid said. She said after she actually went to Moscow, she said that a lot of the propaganda that she was told about Russia in the US was false. And when she actually saw it, I've never been to Moscow, but when she actually saw it in person, she talked about how clean it was. She talked about how the food actually tastes like real food. I guess they don't have GMOs in Russia. She talked about a lot of those things. And these are the things that you don't hear, particularly Western media, say about Russia. It's usually, demonizing. They're usually demonizing Russia. They're usually not telling you the positives. And there's no such thing as a perfect country. But you have to take pause when it's these types of things they don't mention.
What was radicalizing, very shocking and very disturbing for me was the city of Moscow, where I'd never been, the biggest city in Europe, 13 million people. And it is so much nicer than any city in my country. I had no idea. My father spent a lot of time there in the 80s when he worked for the US government and it barely had electricity. And now it is so much cleaner and safer and prettier aesthetically. Its architecture, its food, its service, than any country, city in the United States that you have to, and this is non-ideological. How did that happen? How did that happen?
How did that happen? So again, notice he mentioned the food. And sometimes I think you just really have to visit these countries for yourself so you can see what it's like to actually be in those countries instead of listening to what Hollywood tells you about Russia, right? And they're notorious for that. Instead of what our press tells you about Russia, sometimes you actually have to see these things in person for yourself, and then you can make your own informed decision.
And at a certain point, I don't think the average person cares as much about abstractions as about the concrete reality of his life. And if you can't use your subway, for example, as many people are afraid to in New York City because it's too dangerous, you have to sort of wonder, isn't that the ultimate measure of leadership? And that's true, by the way, it's radicalizing for an American to go to Moscow, I didn't know that, I've learned it this week, to Singapore, to Tokyo, to Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Because these cities, no matter how we're told they're run and on what principles they're run, are wonderful places to live.
Let me comment on that for a second. There's actually an entire channel dedicated for American expats in Singapore. I'm not kidding, on YouTube. And you'll get to hear about everyone's experiences living there. Singapore, from what I've seen in videos, looks absolutely beautiful, right? But that's just what I saw in videos. But they talk about their experiences living there as an American. Apparently, there's quite a bit of American expats in Singapore. But they talk about how different it is there. The crime is almost non-existent. And you hear these things about people living in other countries, and you have to start asking these questions like, what is it that we're doing here? Remember, one of the things I've always told you is that a lot of crime is directly connected to poverty. So you have to look at that. How much poverty is in Moscow? How much poverty is in Singapore? These places that Tucker Carlson is talking about. Look at the poverty line, and then you'll be able to understand maybe why the crime rate is so low. A little bit more on here, and then I have another clip.
That don't have rampant inflation, where you're not going to get raped.
Sir,
excuse me. What is that?
Excuse me. Are you anti-American model?
No. I am the most pro-American. So I'm 54. I was born in 1969. I grew up in a country that had cities like Moscow and Abu Dhabi and Dubai and Singapore and Tokyo. And we no longer have them. And what I have discovered is that's a voluntary choice. As inflation is, as you heard in that fascinating last panel, inflation is the product of choices made mostly by the central bank, not exclusively, but by policymakers. Crime, same. You don't have to have crime, actually. If you don't put, my children don't smoke marijuana at the breakfast table. Why? Because I won't allow them. It's very simple. It's a short conversation. No. And you can run your country the same way.
Is this something that parents do with the kids nowadays? I'm just curious. Like, do parents, you guys that have kids in the chat, do parents smoke weed at the breakfast table with their kids? This was a new one to me. That's why I'm asking. I don't know. Times have changed, so I'm just asking. Oh, Famo said not at the table. I didn't think so. I'm like, wow, things have definitely changed.
We're not going to put up with that, so don't do it. And people understand that. Filth, graffiti, Paris, one of my favorite cities, New York, one of my favorite cities, are filthy. And part of the reason they're filthy is because people spray paint obscenities on buildings and no one cleans it up. So that encourages more people to do the same. And our policymakers, for some reason, don't notice this. London, another one of my favorite cities. You see English girls begging for drugs on the sidewalk. And I thought to myself, if I'm Boris Johnson, who briefly and very badly ran that country, I would ask myself, like, wait a second, my countrymen are begging for drugs on the street. Maybe I should do something about that. But no, he'll show up and give some speech about Ukraine and how we need to send, more cluster bombs to the brave Ukrainians. What are you doing?
You mentioned.
It's just really, really interesting. Do I think we need to spend money elsewhere in this country? Absolutely. This country isn't perfect. Other countries aren't perfect either. They also have their issues. However, that being said, I think that it's almost like Tucker Carlson may be saying that his experience in Moscow made him start to question if living there is a lot better than living here. Oh, I don't know.
Ukraine. By talking to this gentleman, President Putin, for this lengthy interview, my question is, did you had coffee with him? Did you have any off-the-record discussion before the interview?
After.
Did you feel during the interview or before or after that this man can make or is willing to do a historical compromise, number one, on the status of the world with the West, and number two, about Ukraine? Is he a compromiser, yes or no?
Of course, right? I mean, the leaders of every country on the planet, other than maybe the United States during the unipolar period, are forced by the nature of their jobs to compromise. Compromise is part of it. That's what diplomacy is. And he's among those. His position is clearly hardening. Russia has been rebuffed by the West. I mean, Vladimir Putin, I'm not flacking for Putin. I'm an American. I'm not going to live in Russia. I don't love Vladimir Putin. I'm stating the facts.
Notice how he has to continue saying that. See, that right there lets you know something. This is what I was saying before. Because so many people have been persecuted for having any type of connection with Russia, or because they have criticized Ukraine or they've promoted positive things about Russia, these people are instantly called Putin puppets, Russian propagandists. Notice how many times we're not even halfway through, and we won't get halfway through because this is pretty long. We do have a cutoff time. We're not even halfway through the interview, and he's already said this multiple times. I'm an American. I love America. I'm not trying to leave this country, right? That says something.
He asked Bill Clinton to join NATO. He tried to make a missile deal.
He mentioned this in the interview.
He did, that's correct. And he's mentioned it in other forums as well. And NATO said, no, we don't want you. Now, if the point of NATO, the point of NATO originally, of course, the post-war goal of NATO was to keep the Russians, the Soviets, from coming into Western Europe. It was a bulwark against the Russians. So if the Russians asked you to join the alliance, that would suggest you have solved the problem and you can move on to do something constructive with your life. But we refused. And so, I mean, just meditate on that. Go sit in the sauna for an hour and think about what that means.
Before sitting in the sauna.
Okay. There's one more clip that I want to show here. That's something to think about there, but there's something else I want to show you as well, where he talks about not giving Kyiv more money. And I think, some people lost it over this one. But let's go ahead and share this one here. Giving Kyiv more money, insane and cruel. Listen to this one here.
I didn't go to Russia, of course, to promote Vladimir Putin. And if that was my purpose, I'd say so, because I'm not embarrassed. I went because I felt that most Americans, in whose name all of this is being done, don't really know what's happening, and they know nothing about the guy they're supposedly at war with, unofficially. And I just felt that my job, if I have a job in this world, is to bring information to people so they can decide. And so I wanted to do the longest interview I could with Vladimir Putin that contained the most amount of Vladimir Putin talking, not me grandstanding about what a great person I am. When an American journalist interviews someone like Vladimir Putin, the whole point of the interview is to say, I'm a good person and you're not. And that interview was aimed at his colleagues in the newsrooms in the United States. I'm a good person. Why are you such a bad person? You're committing genocide. Okay. That's not fruitful, and that's certainly not my role. I care what God thinks of me, what my wife thinks of me, and what my 4 children think of me, and that's all I care about. So I don't.
You care about what Americans think about you too. That's why you kept saying over and over again, you're an American, you're proud to be an American. But here's the thing here about what he was saying about interviewing Vladimir Putin. What I thought was really interesting is, like, after that interview, people on social media were talking as though Tucker Carlson and Vladimir Putin were like besties, right? As if, like, after the interview, they went out and said, let's go have a couple of beers. Let's go do shots at the club. Like, shots. No, like, people think this sometimes just because you interviewed someone, like, you guys are all hanging out, partying, and you're like best friends. And that obviously is not what this was. This was about him getting the information particularly to the American people, getting the information out of the other side of the story, which we had not heard from him, from someone that is a commentator reporter from the West since the war has started. And what was interesting is the number of people that attacked him. There was some jealousy too. I saw some of the jealousies coming out, and TYT was more focused on Tucker this, Tucker that, and he's doing this and da-da-da, instead of being focused on what Vladimir Putin actually said about our government, about Bill Clinton, about about the CIA and who's running this country, right? They were more focused on the fact that he went over there to do this interview than they were on what was actually said. So there was some jealousy from some. But that being said, where was this same type of pushback from people like Barbara Walters when she interviewed Vladimir Putin? Where was it? Where was it, guys? Vladimir Putin did an interview on CNN. I think it was CNN, right, Eric? We saw it recently. Did an interview on CNN in 2021. Where was that same, like, pushback and anger towards those reporters? We call them commentators. Those commentators. Where was the same pushback? There wasn't. NBC. Thank you, Eric. NBC. There wasn't, because it was mainstream media. This is the new media, you guys. The new media is independent media. It is people that are not a part of the corporate news networks. And I'm telling you, things are really starting to change. And I think that frightens CNN and MSNBC, because at the end of the day, they are losing ratings. Tucker Carlson had over 100 million views. 100 million views.
To prove that I'm a good person, I want to hear Vladimir Putin talk so people in my country can assess what's happening. First things first, Putin wants to get out of this war. He's not going to become more open to negotiation the longer this goes on. One of the things we've learned in the course of the last 2 years is that Russia's industrial capacity is a lot more profound than we thought it was. I mean, Russia's Russia, this country we were assured was a gas station with nuclear weapons, has a pretty easy time making missiles, rockets, and artillery shells, whereas NATO doesn't. So we should think about what that means, one. Two, the West doesn't spend any time, or our policymakers in Washington spend no time thinking about, like, what are the achievable goals here. I have heard personally US government officials say, well, we're just going to have to return Crimea to Ukraine. Well, you don't need to be a Russia scholar to know that's not going to happen short of a nuclear war. That's insane, actually. So even to say something like that reveals that you are a child, you don't understand the area at all, and you have no real sense of what's possible.
But at the end of the day, a lot of this is just common sense. Because if you know about Russia's military capability, you would have known from day one that Ukraine was not going to be able to beat Russia. So the fact that even saying that gives some people pause, or like, that's why we got to keep giving them weapons. I'm like, you hear what I'm saying? This guy has nuclear weapons. What are you thinking about? So I appreciated the interview with Vladimir Putin. I told you guys, I touched on this. There were some things that were said there that I was not aware of, that I did highlight as well. But at the same time, we do have to understand it. It was very obvious to me in this follow-up with Tucker Carlson. It was obvious to me that there was some things that Tucker Carlson was not aware of in reference to how people have been targeted in this country when they go against the deep state or when they go against the State Department narrative. That was very, very clear to me. It almost came across, especially at the beginning, as though he was somewhat naive about that particular issue, which is surprising considering he's been in this industry for a long time. We're going to do calling, guys. I'm going to take a quick break and I will be right back. Lots to discuss, and I'll be back.
All right. This is the in-between part of the show where we're bridging between YouTube and call-in, and we give Sabrina a little break in between. But we'll be posting the call-in link soon. She always posts that to the top of the chat, and you can do call-in on your browser, on your smartphone. That's where we get to hear from you and what you think of all this. And speaking of what you all think of all this, let's see, we got a number of chats built up. Let's see what we got in here from Mr. Worthless Eater. Putin mentioned to Tucker that he knew Tucker applied to work for the CIA. Putin did that as a warning to Tucker to not mess around with him. Yeah, I mean, say what you want about Putin. He's not dumb. He's he's pretty smart and he's pretty effective. And then the Tory, who we'll see, we hear from the Tory in the call in, I hope so, said he thought it couldn't happen to him because he is white. I think referring to Tucker. Yep. And thanks for the super chat, DC. JFK loved Israel and RFK died for arming Israel. Thanks for that one. Thanks for the super chat and the crazy puppet. Honestly, no one trolled Tucker for electricity in Moscow around the same time frame as Moscow hosting Olympics. Small brains, or didn't want to point out product of Cold War propaganda. Yeah, I think that this vision of Russia and the Soviet Union being just all backward and dirty and underdeveloped and whatnot is part of that propaganda. And there may have been some truth to it. It was a huge country, but with this whole ideal of like the whole place didn't have electricity and was like stuck in the 1800s or something, certainly does sound like propaganda. Tucker's an interesting dude. He's got some good takes, and then he's got a whole bunch of stuff that's just stuck in the past and his upbringing. This chat from Ravina. I have 4 friends who are teachers who moved to China to teach. They love it there. They said it's clean, laid back. The kids are respectful and want to learn. They don't want to come back at all. And thanks for the super chat from the crazy puppet. Moscow is a consolidation of a whole country. All roads lead to Moscow. Plus, Soybeanin gets reelected due to popularity of his policies since, he means 2010. And thanks for the super chat. Helpful harm. Profit is prison profits plus healthcare, not drugs. Thanks for that one. And thanks also for this one. Crazy Puppet. Tucker overexpressing concerning trends when repeating his viewpoint, which is expected but has to be taken with a grain of salt because you cannot deny the presence of concern. And thanks for the super chat, Courtney Smith. Yeah, Sabby, unfortunately, some parents do have smoke out sessions with their kids. Only in America, where a kid's party turns into a kickback party. And thanks for the super chat, Sir Bikes a lot. Check out Tucker's interview of Andres Duany. Thanks for that. And Just Call Me Anon noted the interview has over 200 million views on Twitter now. Yeah, he certainly to say it went viral would be quite the understatement. And thanks for the super chat from the crazy puppet. Tucker is trying to fill in RT America void. Not bad choice. Thanks for that. Yeah, there's definitely this whole just this concept of just hearing from Putin. I mean, there's the elites, the billionaires, that whole class that are kind of running this country. They have this very elitist mindset where they don't want the general populace, who they would see as the peasants, to be hearing other viewpoints and from official enemies like Putin. They just want you to hear what they want you to hear in their propaganda. And so this kind of interview they hate. Now let's see what we got over on the old rock fins here. Let me scroll this up a little. I gotta shift the window. Sometimes it scrolls a little, but we can deal with that. Here we go. Thanks for this tipped comment on Rockfin from Dave Burt. Thank you, Sabby Sabs and Eric. And thank you, Dave. And thanks for this tipped comment on Rockfin, Linda Corey. Everyone in the Seattle area should join Seattle for Assange this Saturday at 2:30 p.m. on the 45th Street overpass. We will be waving signs and hanging banners to try to secure Assange's release. Thanks for telling us about that, Linda. So that's Saturday, 2:30 in Seattle. So yeah, definitely join that one if you're in the area and if you can. And thanks for this tipped comment on Rockfin, Roger. Brother Muhammad was referring to a CBI we covered last year, a right to collectively bargain. State that employees have a fundamental right to organize and bargain collectively through representatives of their own choosing for the purpose of negotiating wages, hours, and work conditions, and to protect their economic welfare and safety at work. Prohibit any law that interferes with, negates, or diminishes the right of employees to organize and bargain collectively. Also, I am now convinced that Kim Ivey was right about the Mossad got Epstein evidence on our elected officials that they would ignore. They are contributing to genocide. Also, the credit card industry is the #1 obstacle to closing the income to cost of living, which is why they are against minimum wage laws. Don't forget Maine and Cynthia. And thanks for this tip comment from JVB. And thanks again, Dave, for also that tip comment saying thanks, Sabs. And thank you, Dave, and all those commenters. Yeah, so tonight we were like, we'll be transitioning to call-in shortly when Sabby pops back. So anyone's wondering what we're doing here and who this Eric T. Red guy is, but I'm usually in the background. I'm hidden in the foreground. But yeah, what I always try to push on for when we're talking about these subjects and all these things is to make the connections back to what are the root causes. Like, and one of the big things that I think we really need to be bringing up is that the fixes to this, to fix really any and all of these things, we need a Congress that represents us. We need an executive branch that represents us, the 99%. And instead, we have the opposite. We have a Congress and a president that represent the billionaires, the 0.1% that represent the bankers, all the huge corporations, whether it's healthcare, whether it's real estate is a big one. We need guaranteed housing for all. Any quality public housing unit that's built is seen as a threat by the real estate industry because it will, as just a factual matter, it will depress the real estate market just because there'll be more units. And so because the Congress and the executive and the whole government works for the billionaires and the class, they are corrupt, which is something I think we cannot say enough. They are corrupt. then instead of helping us, helping the 99%, which they were elected to do, which they should, they are representing the billionaires, in that whole class of people. It's the core problem. So then that's the MC part, the money and corruption. I'm always saying MCDS. So then we get to the D part, the demand, right? We need to be out there for identifying this corruption and then demanding that it get fixed, and this is something that I think to really get anywhere, we're going to have to be in the streets, demanding change with that and getting real about it. And it's, and then the things we'll be demanding connect into the solutions, and we're going to have to basically cut the puppet strings, cut the money strings that are why they are corrupt, why they represent the 0.1% and not us. And I think unless we're showing that vision of how to have a better world and what it takes to get there, I think we're going to keep flailing, and we need to make these connections. And we can talk about it more in call-in. We also just got a new super chat. Let's see here. Let's put this one up. From the Crazy Puppet, who's been very generous tonight. And
thank you.
More so now. Thank you. I think, yeah, it's tough to put Israel in the chat sometimes because YouTube does, I'll say this, yeah, YouTube does actively censor based on keywords and the length of the chat. And if you put certain things in, yeah, YouTube, it'll look like it went through and it just doesn't go through. YouTube will just squash it. All right. I think Israel is building a, quote, tower of cards that will lead to collapse to the button, and we will see another use of nuclear button. We need it to stop all actions that are not of international and humanitarian consent. Bruh, the sink is running. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate that.
And I also think, and we can talk about this on Call-In too, I also think that this is the end for Israel. I think their reputation has been completely destroyed after all of this.
Now.
Yeah, I don't think there's any coming back from that, to be honest.
Got to give the people what they want. Just keep it, Cam. Jesus. Come on,
no. All I see is a furry ball.
You lazy bum. Like,
hello.
What you doing? You got anything to say to the folks? She says, trying to sleep here. All right, you go back to sleep. It's Kiva, Kiva.
Kiva. Okay.
Yes, Kiva.
All right.
We actually did have a cat once named Kiva with a B as well. So that's another story. All right.
That's interesting.
Moving on.
All right, heading to Call-In, guys. Let's do the damn thing. This is episode 153. Israel attacks Rafah. Wolff and Hudson. Tucker speaks out. And anything else you want to talk about, let's chat. We'll head on over there. The link is pinned to the top of the chat. A lot of you guys that come over there, you know how we do this. All you got to do is click on that link and you'll be there. You don't even have to download the app. You can actually access Call-In from your laptop as well, and you can call in from your laptop. But let's go ahead and head on over there, guys. Lots to discuss. You know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.